It's more a statement of my view than a question. But let me tell you what I think. I really oppose the proposal that's before the Montgomery County Council to adopt a ZTA that will end single-family housing in the county, in portions of the county, for the purpose of allowing multifamily so-called attainable housing units to be built in their place. Though, of course, I speak only for myself, I very much believe that many residents in our village share my views, and rightly so. This proposal would greatly increase the value of land in VMA and other areas of the county. If multiple units can be built where a single home now stands, there's a profit to be made by buying that land and building those units, especially when they do not need to provide affordable units. The word attainable in this context has no meaning. Attainable by who and at what price? It will, in my view, result in high-income, high-priced units being built on this land. Every house that comes on the market will, in all likelihood, be bought by developers eager to make a quick buck. In doing so, they will devastate this community and others across the county. Communities that have lasted for generations, that support warm, inclusive, stable communities, will be gone, to be replaced by fancy housing units for a purpose that no one can really explain. After all, who among us would choose to stay? Since there's no obligation for the developers to bear the costs of the sewer, water, and street improvements that would be needed, or to provide the additional parking, those costs would fall on the village and its taxpayers. I anticipate large increases in our property taxes to subsidize the developers and their so-called attainable units. The village, I believe, would be bankrupted, and current residents will probably rebel at the necessary increase in taxes. Many will choose to leave. For these reasons, I urge the village council to reject the proposal, to send a letter to the county accepting those changes. And I urge the village council to demand that this proposed ZTA be submitted for examination by the planning department for its compatibility with the county's master plan. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your allowing me to go ahead with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, are there any other non-attainable housing comments or questions? Anyone? We have a nice audience here.
It's all about the attainable.
Okay, all right. Well,
Actually, if I
yeah.
can ask a separate question.
Yes, absolutely.
I was just wondering, because I know the fall is coming, we lost a lot of trees, unfortunately, over the summer. There are a lot of trees that are also under stress, that have shoots coming from the base of the tree, which should be cut back. I'm wondering what the plan is for taking care of our village trees this fall. And also, I did mention to Ed Mulron when he came by, because we're very happy to benefit from a new village tree this year. I did mention the volcano mount, the mulch accumulation around the base of the trees, but I hope that we'll watch for that this year so it doesn't reoccur.
Do we have a plan for trees?
Yeah.
You're probably going to address that in your.
Most pruning that should happen in the winter. So we'll go around and do an audit of trees that we really need pruning, just maintenance pruning. And we'll do that in the winter. During the rest of the year, we just do case by case basis. So and we're based on a complaint. So if someone has an issue with the tree, if there's a broken branch or something like that, we'll automatically send them out there to do that.
So sorry, there's an audit. Do you go down the streets to look at each tree?
I actually do. Yeah, I do that every month. I have a list of trees that are like on the list to prune. But in the winter, we'll do the entire village.
So if there's a tree on our street, we should let you know.
Yes, if there's a tree with an issue on your street, not just, it needs to be turned back or something, but a serious issue, let me know and we'll address it right away.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. Okay, Susan. You have a question, Susan Kahn?
Yes, thank you so much. Katie, I also have a conflict, so I'm not going to be able to be here in a part of it. I'm going to could I make a very brief statement also about the zoning change that I'm most concerned about? The impact I'm most concerned about is environmental and also taxes and infrastructure. It's unclear to me that the protections are there for us as residents to avoid paying some of the infrastructure fees that will be needed to improve water, sewer, traffic, sort of gas lines, whatever that's going to be needed for a lot of units on the singles family zoning, as it is now, if that shifted to multifamily. I'm also concerned about the impervious surface coverage that we have certain regulations at VMA for how much is covered in a lot. And it's really concerning to me that you could have a lot more impervious surface coverage, a lot more runoff. And we've already been concerned about flooding and rain and that sort of thing in our area. So the environmental impact of this is concerning. Saying that it's for affordable housing, it's kind of like a bait and switch, because then we hear in the actual regulation things about attainable housing that are going to be sold at market rate. So I think that there's some question about who's going to really benefit from this aside from the developers and high income residents who might want units with smaller yards in the existing single zoning of homes. And so finally, the county executive is opposed to this. His legal team, if anyone has questions about why and how it's okay to legally be opposed to this zoning change, I think they could talk to Mark Elrich's office about that. So I just think for a lot of reasons, we should be very careful about moving into a statement where we were positive or proactively supporting this. I'm hoping the council will be in opposition to this, because I do think it hurts our existing community, and there will be an incentive to maybe just throw out all of our kind of not just zoning protections, but all the things that we have said about setbacks and coverage of a lot and infrastructure, and et cetera. So thank you for thinking about that.
Sure, thank you, Susan. Okay, well, I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm gonna move on to our headliner for this evening. So Miss Lisa Gavoni, before we start, I would like to sincerely thank you for accepting our invitation to attend tonight's meeting and for providing a presentation on attainable housing, especially on the same evening. I know you're juggling other events, so thank you. I'm appreciative of you speaking about the latest on the issue. And you're also a bit of a YouTube star. I found many of your segments really helpful. The definition of the missing middle and transit-oriented development, why rent is so high. So our residents, they've been hearing a lot of buzz pertaining to the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative in Montgomery County, and wondering what it might mean for our municipality. And so residents, I've asked Ms. Gavoni tonight because I want to listen about the proposed plan to more or less learn about it, and let's walk before we run about these issues. And I sent Lisa some specs about the VMA, where we're located in relation to the growth corridors. Most of the VMA is located off Brookville Road. That's not considered, I don't think, a growth corridor, but it is close to Connecticut and Wisconsin avenues. And so after the presentation, she has agreed to take questions from council members and from the residents as well. And so without further ado, Ms. Gavoni, thank you, and welcome remotely to the Village of Martin's Addition. The floor is yours.
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me. I've been taking a little bit of a tour of municipalities and civic associations, but it's always been a real highlight to meet the community and go to places. I live in the eastern part of the county, so I don't get to venture over to places like Village of Martin's Addition. So it's nice to do a little bit of research and learn about other parts of the county. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a brief presentation, and I'll try to touch on some of the points that were asked in the questions. But if I don't, feel free to ask questions. I also will share my contact information. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you all see okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you all can turn that way. We have some people in the house too. Thank you.
Sure. So I like to start with this picture because this picture is actually a triplex and it's outside downtown Silver Spring. You can only tell that it's a triplex because it has 3 mailboxes, which you can see there, and you can see there's entrances on the front, on the side, and then there's one on the other side. If you can't see, it's kind of just puts in perspective to the type of housing we're talking about. So, in short, in 2021, we were asked by the county council to consider zoning reforms that would allow for greater opportunities for, quote, missing middle housing in Montgomery County. Attainable housing strategies is the resulting effort. The planning board prepared recommendations to develop the development of more diverse types of housing, which includes missing middle type of housing. And missing middle housing generally refers to things like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, things like that. And I also want to be clear that there's no zoning text amendment on the table right now. The planning board sent up a study, so they were asked to do this study by the county council, and so that leads into why are we doing this right now? Well, one, we were asked to do this by the county council. Yes, it was the previous county council, but we still needed to fulfill that obligation. The other reasons we're doing this is we also recently completed a general plan. It's called Thrive Montgomery 2050, and it creates a framework of policy guidance that on the topic of things like diversifying our housing stock. Second, many other jurisdictions are doing what we're doing right now. We actually just had a speaker series tonight that is actually recorded on our planning board's website if you're interested, where we heard from other jurisdictions that are doing this, one of which is Arlington County, and the other is the city of Alexandria, Minneapolis, states like Oregon are doing it. So it's you can say that it's a planning it's a planning best practice right now. It seems to be the fad that other jurisdictions are looking at this. The other is the county has a significant supply housing issue. The status quo is not working. We are underproducing on housing. Our housing supply is constrained. It's harder to enter that homeownership market. It's hard to find a rental unit in this county that's affordable. It's just hard to find housing here. And I know we're not alone in this. I look at other jurisdictions regionally, nationally, but this is just one step in a slew of other steps that we're taking to look at the housing shortage. And then there's a significant equity issue at play. Single family zoning is what happened after covenants were not allowed. It is, and generally speaking, de facto segregation. Arlington County actually they're in the middle of a lawsuit against their missing middle housing proposal, and the NAACP in Arlington County wrote a really fascinating brief on the history of single-family zoning nationally, and also in the county that speaks to the impact that single-family zoning has on who can live here and the barrier to entry in the homeownership market and the housing market that it causes. The other thing is, single-family homes they're getting larger in the county. This is gross floor area, so it's actually gross floor area doesn't include things like garages or unfinished space. So there actually are, bigger houses than 3,800, but since the typical home was built in the 1950s, we've seen the square footage of single family homes growing almost by over 2,000 square feet. This is largely done through the tear down rebuild process, which I'm sure you're all familiar with when someone takes a smaller home and bulldozes it and puts up a larger McMansion that's unattainable to most people. And this is done by right. So what by right means is you just go straight to the Department of Permitting Services and get your permit to do this. There's no community engagement. There's no other process besides going to DPS to get your permit. So what we're trying to do is create a competitive process to that tear down rebuild process that can make more units that are more attainable than a new single family detached home that's being built. And size has a big impact on affordability. In 2023, the average detached home in Montgomery County sold for over $970,000 compared to $440,000 for attached structures that includes townhouses and condos. If you look at that distribution of where these homes fall, you can see that for detached homes, most of them sold in that $600,000 to $800,000 range or that over $1 million range. But when you look at the green for attached, you can see it's closer down to that $400,000 to $500,000 range. and those condos and coops even further down that range, and just highlighting the impact that size and type has on affordability. And I also want to be clear that, someone mentioned earlier that this is not affordable housing. You're correct. This is not affordable housing. This is something that we're calling attainable housing because the products that we make will be more attainable to more households than a new single-family detached tear down rebuild home. And this is generally what we're talking about. We understood, we've heard a lot of concerns that this will change the character of your single family neighborhoods. But this image is generally showing what we're talking about. So on the left, you have that tear down rebuild. And on the right, you have a Photoshop duplex. So what we're talking is, more housing diversity, but generally the same character. And we'll get into this later, but we're not proposing to change setbacks, heights, or lot coverage. So this is what the applicable zones are for the attainable housing strategies recommendations. I'm going to go through and define terms. So as you can see, the Village of Martins Additions is a sea of yellow. I actually looked at your zoning today. It looks like you're all R60 except for one parcel that it's CRT, which is the mixed use zone. I imagine that's your town hall or something. But generally, this would be, so these zoning changes, if there was a zoning text amendment, would be applicable to the majority of the homes and parcels in your village. And at the beginning, someone mentioned, growth corridors. So Thrive Montgomery 2050 identifies growth corridors in the county. And these are areas of the county where we're highlighting where we want to see more growth in the next 30 years. They are generally our BRT corridors, but there's some exceptions to that, like River Road. But these are the areas that Thrive identified of places that, we want to see our growth. We've done a lot of master planning for the red line areas. We've done a lot of master planning for the purple line station areas. Now we're moving to these BRT areas where the county's putting in significant investment in either now or in the future that we hope of places that can really build upon that investment in BRT. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the priority housing district and my recommendations. So the priority housing district is a 1 mile buffer from Metro's red line, purple line, and MARC stations plus 500 feet from those growth corridors. And that priority housing district allows reduced parking standards, and it allows an additional unit type called a quadplex, which is 4 units that look like a detached home. And so if you, here's a map of the villages of Martin Additions, and you can see that area in the green in the north would be part of that priority housing district. And I'm going to make this presentation available, so don't worry if you don't catch everything that I go through. So I'm going to just jump right into the recommendations because I'm sure that's what most people are they're here for. So the Attainable Housing Strategies study, it recommends 3 scales of recommendations that have different recommended tools and different geographic targets. So at that small scale, those are those duplexes and triplexes and quads that we're talking about, the interior within single family zoned neighborhoods. And then there's going to be a medium scale we're talking about a new optional method of development. What an optional method of development is it's a type of development that requires discretionary planning staff, planning board, or planning director review. So it just adds, I talked a little bit earlier about the by right proposal where you can just go straight to Department of Permitting Services. You can't do that for the optional method. It requires review. And that we're talking about for that medium scale, we're talking about those growth corridors that we highlighted earlier. And then for the large scale, we're talking about leveraging that master planning process for specific segments of those growth corridors. So for example, right now we're working on the University Boulevard corridor plan near where our office is located in Wheaton. So we're thinking about, we're going through the community engagement process right now, presenting preliminary recommendations where we'll talk about upzoning these parcels to more density to really, like I said, leverage that existing growth corridor and investment. So I'm going to walk through each of the recommendations. So The small scale is the most pertinent to the Village of Martin's additions. What we're talking about here is those house scale duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes that are in similar size as existing detached homes. They would be allowed in that R60 zone. You would be allowed duplexes and triplexes everywhere, and quadplexes in that priority housing district that was highlighted in green earlier. They would be allowed by right, which means that you can go straight to the Department of Permitting Services with one caveat. You would be required to have conformance with something we're calling the pattern book, and I'll talk about that next. The development standards are similar to what they are today for detached housing. There would be no changes to building height, setbacks, or lot coverage. There would be some reductions allowed for on-site vehicle parking. And these changes would be implemented in through something called a zoning tax amendment. So what a zoning tax amendment does is it changes the standards and the conditions, the language in the zoning code, chapter 59. So it's like a bill, but instead of a bill, it's called a zoning tax amendment because it's modifying the zoning code. Like I said, there's no current zoning tax amendment. Right now, the council and the planning department is focusing on listening sessions with the community, which I'll talk about at the end. And this is that pattern book that I was talking about. So, a few elements of the pattern book that I want to highlight is, first we're talking about building placement. The pattern book, will articulate the placement of the building on the lot. Beyond just, the setbacks requirements. So think of it as like an illustration of what the development standards are. It will also highlight things like massing, clear guidance on the building facade, frontage design, how the building communicates with the street, on-site parking. We don't want parking all up front. We like to, tuck it in the back or tuck it in the side so that we can have things like neighborly house details, which we think are really important, that illustrate things that we think make great houses, like porches, stoops, balconies, sunrooms, and decks. And next is that medium scale recommendation. Like I said, it's not applicable to your village, but it is applicable to some of your neighbors that are located on Connecticut Avenue, Wisconsin Avenue. The type of housing we're talking about here is townhouses, stack flats, which are stack flats are basically units that look like townhouses, but they're one unit stacked on top of each other, and small apartment buildings up to 19 units. They would be allowed in the R60 and the R90 zone within 500 feet of a Thrive 2050 identified growth corridor. And it would be implemented through that optional method with a site plan. And that, like I said, that requires some administrative review process, whether it's through the planning board or the planning director. The development standards, there would be greater flexibility allowed here, reduced setbacks and increased lot and site coverage, but it would have a requirement for public open space. We don't actually have since there's no zoning tax amendment, I can't tell you what exactly the standards for the medium scale would be at this time. We just know that we were thinking of greater flexibility. And again, it would be implemented through a zoning tax amendment, that legislative change to the zoning code. And then I'm almost done. Next, we'll talk about the large scale. So large scale, we're thinking, 4 stories tall, small apartment buildings, but also, mixed use live work units. We're talking about segments of our growth corridors, and it would also require preliminary and site plan review process, which is also, offers vehicle for community engagement, planning board public hearings, just basically the existing processes that is outlined today when you see large scale development in the county. Again, we would probably follow the applicable development standards for what we see in some of our mixed use zones, the commercial residential zones. And then you would follow, any recommendations that we have from design guidelines. Unlike the small and medium scale, large scale recommendations would either be implemented through the master planning process, or we could have, create in the future a new zone for the corridors. This is not something that's currently on the table now, but it's something that we're thinking about. Does the current zoning work for this new type of corridor planning era that we're entering? So everyone's favorite topic, parking. I make this joke every single time and it always falls flat, but I always say it, is that this is the portion of the presentation where I say that the tomatoes start getting thrown at me because we're talking about parking. So for parking, we are recommending a parking reduction for properties that have street parking, or if you're inside that priority housing district. So if you have street parking and you're outside of the priority housing district, so those areas outside of the green, you would be allowed a reduction of 50%. So that what that means is a duplex, instead of providing 2 spaces per unit, you would provide 1 space per unit or 2 spaces total. If you're in that priority housing district, you would be required, and you have no street parking, again, it would be a 50% reduction where you would only have to provide 2 spaces per duplex. And then if there's street parking present, that would be a 75% reduction in parking. So you would only have to provide 1 space per duplex. And then I just want to highlight that we have some upcoming listening sessions that the county council and the planning department are currently undergoing. I'll provide my contact information next, but you can sign up online to RSVP. We have one in Germantown next week. We have one in Bethesda Chevy Chase High School next week. We actually had to move it to Bethesda Chevy Chase High School because we had so many RSVPs, which is exciting. But just highlighting that. And we also have a virtual listening session on October 2nd, which from what I understanding, also has had, hundreds of RSVPs too. And, I want to say that listening to the community has been very eye-opening for it, not just me, but I know for the council and the planning board. There's a lot of emotion around this issue. And I know that I'm not here to, win hearts and minds. I know I'm not going to do that, but if I can help provide clarifying information for all of you, please feel free to reach out and ask me any question at any time. With that, thank you for letting me present to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. And if I can call you that, Lisa, Ms. Scavone, whichever you prefer. Thank you for sharing your contact information, and we'll make your presentation available too. I'll start with my council colleagues. Susan, Arthur, did you have any questions for Lisa?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for that interesting discussion. Among the questions I have is that in addition to a greater number of people, I did not see, and I haven't read the final report, but I did not see or hear and have not heard the analysis that went in on the production of greater services. There's going to be more people. You mentioned parking as one, but there will be all the other utilities, the dealing with sewage, water, and one other issue is the permeable surfaces. If more parking is held on the premises, that will, I think, leave less room for permeable surfaces. And right now, just from the larger houses, from the tear downs and buildups, we are having issues throughout the village of water flow. And I have to say the county has not helped, even though the county imposed water retention requirements on new construction a few years ago. They have not followed up and policed it. Any builder who wants an exception has been given that exception. And so we have had numerous water issues throughout the village. And I see not necessarily the building coverage, but the parking lot coverage and further decreasing permeable surfaces. So how have you thought about all the other functions that go along with people in your planning?
That's a really great question. So I want to say that first, we are meeting with WSSC and Pepco. We've already met with Pepco. Well, my coworker did. I was unfortunately under the weather. We're meeting with WSSC to talk about these things, get them in, bring them up to speed on the plan. So we are thinking about those, utilities. We're also thinking about the impact on schools and transportation. So we have existing processes called the Growth and Infrastructure Policy that implements our Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. These units, they will pay impact fees, which is good, and that will go to things like transportation and schools. but we're still, the hard part about this is none of them have been built yet. And I'll be completely honest, like, we don't know how many we're going to get. So one of the things that we are also doing is we'll have an initial check-in at 2 years and say, how is our infrastructure working? How many of these are we seeing? We know from other jurisdictions that they're not seeing a ton of them, but we don't know what we don't know. And so I don't want to say, we're going to see, 5 of these, because I don't know. I know Arlington, they just told us that they think they saw like 74 permits in their first year, but they're currently dealing with a lawsuit. So that's to say that, your issue is heard. I understand it. We have existing processes, future processes we're proposing, and we are discussing, we're having a lot of discussions with Department of Permitting Services. The thing about stormwater that's in the report is that the stormwater law is kind of is silent on what protections are there for multi-unit structures, and we think that should change as part of this. It wouldn't be in the zoning text amendment, but we are thinking of other processes that we need to look at to make sure that the unintended consequences are minimized with this.
Okay, thank you.
Susan, do you have a question or?
No.
Not now,
Okay.
okay. Well, our council is literally 2 men down. They're both Jeff and Andrew at a back to school night, and hopefully they can jump on later. So I'm gonna yield my time to the residents in the room and also our village manager, because multifamily means more people and that means more
More
things to
management, more
management.
management.
Do you have a question, Michael? Would you like to ask a question? I wanted to give you some time to ask something.
Not at this point, but
Okay.
if you're online, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. And if you're in the room, we'll ask you to come up to the podium so that we can all hear you.
Does anyone
Any
want to go
questions?
first in the room?
No, that's first. So it's just at this point, hi, this is Andy Lean, Giovanni. I just have one question at this point, and I'm sure I'll follow up with others. I'm curious as to why this is something that would be permitted by right as opposed to a variance. By right is a pretty radical way of dealing with the situation, I think, irrespective of the fact that single family housing has by right, but that's what the zoning code says right now. And there, as people know in this room, there have been challenges to that. We are dealing with that at a village level and have been dealing with that for many, many years. So just because the fact that building a single family house in this community of this size is something that's allowed by right under the present zoning code doesn't mean that it's not being challenged or it's a good thing. To add to that, the right of multifamily housing, which presents several challenges in the form of the infrastructure challenges that have been mentioned. For example, parking is definitely a serious one in a village this size. You have a lot of older homes do not have garages. There's on-street parking, and a lot of the streets here have waistlines. So you really can only park on one side of the street. As anybody knows who drives around here, most of the time during the day, you're pulling over to the side to let traffic pass. So if you crowd in more people with more vehicles, that poses a problem. And I don't buy the argument that you can justify a reduction of the parking because you're close to mass transit, for example. We're pretty far from mass transit. The triplex that, for example, you showed in Silver Spring, it's a little deceiving because we know where that is. It's downtown Silver Spring, which is close to the red line, the new purple line, several bus lines coming through that. So there's mass transit that could support a triplex like that. A triplex here is going to have an entirely different impact in terms of transportation access and all that. I'll leave it at that because there are many, many more questions I have. There have been challenges. I know that people have questions here about the concept of attainability, what happens when you socialize costs but maximize the profits for builders, which you would get in this situation. Think of other jurisdictions that are close into major urban areas. I am from the San Francisco Bay Area, and that is exactly what's happened with multifamily housing there. And they have a housing crisis far worse than ours. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Sorry, that was a long-winded question, but
Sure.
If you could just ask the question about the by right as opposed to.
Sure. So that's a really great question. It's actually one that we haven't heard a lot of. So we are trying to make a competitive process to the tear down, rebuild model that we see, which, as you noted, is by right. I don't think that if that process was by right and this one was not, we would ever see a single duplex or triplex. I think there's also economies at scale at play. The economics of building a small building in this county but having to go through the discretionary planning department process and the planning board review is, I don't think, feasible from the economic analysis that we've seen. But certainly, you know, your point is understood. I guess I wasn't that aware of the by right being challenged. I haven't heard that, but that's good information to hear.
Thank you. Does anybody else in the room have a question?
Anyone online?
And so far, no one's raised their hand yet online, but
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth
Yes,
Bowen, yes.
I just wanted to,
Okay, identify.
yes, I'm Elizabeth Boland, president of Martin's Edition, and sorry, my phone is, typing everything I'm saying right now.
Oh, and if you can also say what street you live on too, so. Yeah.
No, that's okay.
Mhm.
Oh, Monty and I.
We
yes,
know you.
Anyway.
You're
so
good
anyway,
for it.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
hi. So I just wanted to say that, there are two things. One, you said something about how not enough housing around here. And I just wanted to let you know that at present, there are 1,289 properties for sale in our county. And a lot of them are under $200,000. And so there was a house on the border of Chevy Chase on the other side of Connecticut Avenue, cube bungalow that recently sold for $1.6 million because of the land. And big townhouses went up in its place, and they are currently on the market for $3.6 million. And I just don't think there's nothing attainable about that for anyone. A first-time home buyer trying to get their foot in the door, second-time home buyers who started out somewhere else to build equity, trying to move to Chevy Chase for whatever the reason is. The other thing I'm really worried about is the historical impact of all of this. There are a lot of counties like Darnestown where there were maybe one farmhouse, or Chevy Chase has such rich history. There's a log cabin on Thornapple Street that was built in the 1700s. Like, I grew up across the street from it. It's a gorgeous building. And my mom always said, well, it'll never get torn down. It's on a great big lot. It's rich with history. There was a write-up in the Washington Post about it. Not only that, when I know it's not pertaining to Martin's Edition, but I feel strongly that Chevy Chase were all in this together as of all of Montgomery County in this little bit radical plan that you guys have. When you say the buy right, most of Chevy Chase Village Historical District falls in the priority housing district, and due to its proximity to the Friendship Heights Metro Station, meaning that a historic home could be demolished and replaced with quadplexes. 160 properties within the village, like Chevy Chase Village, are located within 500 feet of Connecticut Avenue or Wisconsin Avenue. So when you say they're major growth corridors, that means that a beautiful historic home, rich with character, well built with old growth wood, like, could just be torn down, thrown away, and a 19-unit multifamily housing could be put up in its place. And I just don't understand. I don't know if you guys have driven by and seen the beauty in our neighborhoods. I don't know how that's attainable. It's certainly not sustainable. You're throwing away, like, not just history, but I think well-built homes that we'll never see again. So that's all I have to say.
So one thing I want to add is that if you're in a historic district, the processes remain. You still have to go to the historic review, the HPC. That's not changing. I'm free to connect you with our historic preservation supervisor, Rebecca Ballo, if you have any questions about that process, but that's not changing.
Wait, okay, so I'm confused because there's a lot of, I don't know if it's miscommunication or what I have heard, and I've heard from so there was a Section 5 meeting, there was a Section 3 meeting, and someone got up and said, someone asked the question, who's to say a 19-unit building couldn't be put up in my section? This is actually not even the village, but it actually happened in the village too. And also Section 5 and Section 3. And the woman on their call said, there's nothing in the zoning that says that can't be done.
You can
You're
build
telling me something different.
So what I'm saying is that those processes that exist for historic review that would review that 19-unit building are still in place.
But how can you build a 19? There's a whole Chevy Chase Historical Society who spent decades preserving the character of our neighborhood. Are they going to have a say in it, or is it just all whatever the county council decides?
It's the Historic Review Commission, Historic Preservation Commission that would have a
And
say.
who's on that commission?
I don't, who's on that commission?
Mhm.
I don't know their names. I can give you that information.
So you're saying that our Chevy Chase Historical Society and our local municipalities and the boards and the elected officials we have would have no say in this?
I'm not an expert in historic review, but from what I understand is that all historic work in a historic district requires a HOP, historic area work permit, and that is required to go to the Historic Preservation Commission, and that process would still exist.
I
But
can jump
will
in
that-
here and it may help
Oh,
to add
Ron,
some
yeah.
explanation. Yeah,
This is
Ron Holt, village attorney.
Yeah.
So there is a process under county law for properties to be designated historic. That requires an application and approval by the HPC. And what Lisa is saying is those properties that have been designated historic would continue to be reviewed with respect to construction projects under that process. But to the residents' question, if property has not been designated historic, then it would not have that protection. So the Chevy Chase Historical Society does not designate properties as historic for purposes of the HOP permits. Only the HPC, the county entity, can do that. I hope that helps.
Mhm. Thank you, Ron. Anyone else in the room? Okay, I'm gonna jump on to people who've waiting. Thank you for patiently waiting. Marty, I see your hand is up. Marty Langland. Oh, Marty, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, thank you for doing this. I want to thank Lisa for being here, and I want to thank the council, the village council for having this. I have all the questions that have been raised already, plus some. And I have one of those old houses built in the 1890s that has no historic designation, but would certainly provide enough space on my lot to cut down all the trees and put those 19 units on. It's really an absolute total concern to me why this huge zoning change is not being handled through the master plan process, which requires much more rigorous analysis, much more public review and input. I think this is such a huge change that it could demolish our village. Certainly the historic character that we were just talking about and the tree growth, because nothing in the plans, I've looked, Lisa, at the pattern book plans that you have, and the pattern book isn't finalized yet. So this is still kind of up in the air. But there's not room for a single canopy tree on any of the patterns that you guys have put out in the information packets. And, you know, the thing that makes this so valuable, not just Martin's Additions, but all of these close-in older neighborhoods, is the fact that we have these old growth trees. We already have a problem with developers outbidding families to buy these older houses that we have and clear cutting the lots and putting something that's so big that there's no room under the county code, let alone under Martin's Additions code, for a single canopy tree to be even planted, let alone take 50 years to grow. And, you know, these mature tree canopies are the lungs of the Washington area. I've lived in communities where there were no trees, where they were all turned into condos. And believe me, you don't want to live there. The air quality is worse, and it's not just the aesthetics, it's the actual health impacts of that. On the parking issue, you said that you could have only one space for a duplex. Well, we're talking about quads. My 1890s house is in the north end there within that green zone. And how many, I mean, they could all be quads. All my neighbors could turn into quads. Every house that comes in the market in that zone, the financial profitability for the developers is not to put a duplex on there. They'd put quads on every one of them because they could sell each of those units for at least $1.5 million, if not the 3.6 that I guess Andy was talking about or Elizabeth was talking about. I can't imagine what the north end of Martin's Additions would look like with quads on every lot, and that's exactly what the financial economic incentives would set up. So parking, how many parking spaces are required for a quad?
If you're in the priority housing district and you have on-street parking too.
2 for a quad.
Yeah.
So that's 2 per unit. So that's 8 additional cars at least.
No, so 2 total for the entire quad.
2 parking spaces on site. If there are 4 units, I'm just trying to do the math here. If there are 4 units in that quad, and we have 20 quads on the block, which easily could happen. So that's 80 units, each of which would have only 2 parking spaces for those 4 units. So you got 4 families in each building, each lot, and they all probably have at least 2 cars. If they got a nanny, they probably got 3 cars. So let's do the math here. Instead of 20 houses on the block, you now have 80 households, each of whom could have 3 cars. 80 times 3 is 240 cars. And each of those quads would have 2 parking spaces. So you'd have 160 parking spaces max and way more cars. These streets are narrow, as somebody else pointed out. You can't only park on one side most of the time. Where the heck are you going to put all those extra cars? And I will tell you, there's a personal safety issue here too. When I lived in a community where there was no parking down by DuPont Circle and was walking home at midnight from where I had to park my car 3 and 4 blocks from home as a young woman, I'm walking home at midnight after spending an hour going around the block trying to find some place to park my little Volkswagen. I would then have a 3 or 4 block walk home at midnight, almost every night. That was a personal safety issue that I felt so deeply, and that many of my young women neighbors experienced as well. And that was a safe neighborhood, quote unquote, as this is. But walking 3 or 4 blocks at midnight because you cannot park anywhere near your home there's a public health issue here from the air quality of the congestion. There's another public issue here in terms of physical safety, especially for young women, obviously. So there are lots of repercussions here that I don't think have been addressed at all. And I could go on, but I have a couple quick questions for you. The lack of a housing supply that is the sort of underlying assumption here does not seem to me to be accurate. Adam Pagnucco, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, had an article a little while ago pointing out that the county doesn't even have actually any really good data at this point about how many units have been built. We don't know how many are still needed. I know that the county, probably your office, is scrambling to try to find the data. Mark Elrich, our county executive, says that this is completely unnecessary, that there's no housing data right now that says the shortage is so severe as to require any wholesale removal of any zoning at all, that you could certainly build plenty of missing middle and low income housing in lots of places. He mentioned White Flint, he mentioned White Oak, without disrupting any single any existing neighborhood in Silver Spring and Chevy Chase here, anywhere. So if your projections are all based on this notion that we're short on housing, and we're not in fact short on housing, then you're doing a housing demolition derby, which would only profit developers in all these communities for no reason. There is no data justifying this. Lisa, I'm not criticizing you. I appreciate you being here very much, but I want you to take this concern home to the rest of your team, because I'm an economist. I'm looking for data on where's the housing need, the shortage that would need this. I don't see it. Or why the new housing, if it is needed, if you can establish based on data-driven, reality, that you need more middle housing and low-income housing, which we probably do. We don't know how much. Why you wouldn't build that in the areas that have the infrastructure to handle it? Why you wouldn't, for example, give developers an incentive to take the 20% vacant office space in Silver Spring or Bethesda, convert that into affordable or missing middle. Then you got no transportation costs because people are where the jobs are. I realize I've asked you a lot of questions. I'm going to shut up and let other people talk. But Lisa, thank you for taking all these concerns back to the office.
Thank you. I will say that, I think you know that there's a housing issue. I mean, I think we all realize, like, looking at the prices in the first quarter of 2023, the average detached home in this county went for over $1 million. You can't say that's working for everyone here. And you can't say that the tear down rebuild process is working well. I mean, we're just trying to provide options. Yes, we have units in the pipeline that are unbuilt, and we're working to get those built in places like White Flint and White Oak. And you're certainly right. Like, I wish that the executive branch and the Department of Permitting Services had accurate permitting data, that we are looking into that issue. We're trying to work with them on that issue, but I think that we can see from, how fast rents are rising, and how small the supply of for sale housing is, that there is an issue at hand. To the magnitude of how many units are being permitted, we're still trying to work with the executive branch on that. So you are correct there.
Okay. Let's see. Elizabeth, did you have a question?
Elizabeth Goldberg.
Oh, Elizabeth Goldberg. Elizabeth Goldberg, then Elizabeth Bowen. Okay, Elizabeth Goldberg. You're on mute. You're on. There you go. I can hear you. Okay. Elizabeth?
Yes, my name is Jeffrey Goldberg.
Oh, Jeffrey Goldberg. Okay, it's Jeffrey Goldberg.
Good evening. I want to support my neighbors in the village who who made a cogent analysis, but I have another one. I'm 81 with Parkinson's disease and polycythemia vera, a rare blood disease. I asked my 2-year-old to make a house with Legos. It was about 2 inches. Then I said, put the house in a boat, which was about 5 inches. And then I filled up a bathtub and the boat sunk, and with it the house. What I'm trying to say in real terms is that we have a very serious water problem, has been pointed out by everybody. And if you think Pepco is going to come, or Washington Suburban Sanitation Commission, I waited 10 years to have my drain removed, and just 3 inches, so cars wouldn't be cut their tires. And then the line, the electric line, took another 5 years, and when they came, it was put in improperly, and we had to pay the cost of redoing it. I think it's something like Mr. Anand, the founder of marketing, said marketing is sales with a good college education. I find this not even up to the level of a college education.
Right, well,
Okay.
okay, thank you for your comment, Jeffrey Goldberg. Okay, does anybody else, I don't know if, Lisa, did you want to respond
Yeah.
to that or,
Oh.
oh,
Oh, no, I was just gonna say thank you for your comment. I understand, we are meeting with WSSC and Pepco to try to work with them on this issue. They are aware of it, but there's obviously no resolution at this time.
okay. All right, I'm gonna, Elizabeth, then Yasmina, and then I'd say Romy and Doug, and then I don't know if Marty has a new hand up, but we'll do that order. Okay, go ahead,
Okay, so
Elizabeth.
I was just trying to briefly pull some stuff up and figure out how to count how many active or coming soon listings are in 20815, 20814, and 20816. And there are too many to count right now, all under $1 million. And they're all ranging between, I only looked in 2 bedrooms and up, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, all ranging from, these are active and coming soon listings, not pending, not under contract, ranging from $169,500 to $989,500. And I just wanted you to take this feedback back to the powers that be who are making this decision to know that in this area, no one's going to buy a $980,000 house and put up 3 units and sell for $200,000-$300,000 each. That's just not going to happen. The developers have no incentive to do that. They will not do that. They're not doing that right now. And they're going to build monstrosities at $3 million each that no one even in our village could even afford that. Every single home, well, I'm going out on a limb. I bet at least 70% of the people that live in Martin's Addition or Section 3 or Section 5, if they had to get their foot in the door 10 years from now, if your plan goes through, none of us would be able to afford to live here because the developers are going to not just ruin the character, but the cost to actually live here is going to go through the roof.
Yeah, I have another point, actually. I have a question. Is there anything that prevents, I mean, what are these houses, are these going to be marketed as things that people own, or are we thinking that there is a possibility? Is there any limitation on say rental? And I ask the question because there is a phenomenon going on to this point of large hedge funds, large corporate investors buying up single family housing and certainly quads, duplexes. And there has been a move to turn America into a nation of renters as opposed to owners. That has driven a little bit of the extraordinary upsurge in rent. So making rental units unaffordable. I know this from my own work experience. Is there any qualification in this plan that emphasizes home ownership over sort of developers turning around and renting multifamily? And again, this wouldn't be if this is market rate, those rents will be astronomical given where we are. Go ahead.
Sure. So there's nothing we can put in zoning. So we are working separately in tandem on something called a subdivision regulation, which is an update to the subdivision code that would allow more fee simple home ownership, but that also has not been written at this time. We are hopeful to see more home ownership product than rental, but we don't know. It's certainly there's no limitations. You could do rental.
Thank you. Yasmin, did you have a question? Okay.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you very much for coming to meet with us tonight. I have a first question actually on behalf of one of my neighbors who is the chair of our stormwater task force and who has written you an email with some with a lot of very pointed questions. And so I want to make sure on the record that you have received that email and we'll be able to respond to him. Otherwise, I'd be glad to share those questions with you tonight.
What's his name?
Mark Schaefer. Yeah.
Yeah, so I responded to
Okay.
him today. Unfortunately, I was out sick for earlier this week, and so I'm a little backed up on email right now, but I did reply to him and say that I would try to reply to him as soon as possible.
Great. I appreciate that, Lisa. I am also concerned about the impact of this change on the population and increased population, separate from the impact on stormwater, on overcrowding of our streets. I was interested in looking at your website because we all know that there will be an impact as we increase permeable surfaces, increase population, increase school children, that all of our infrastructure will be taxed. However, I was surprised to see on the website that it says, and I quote, while impacts on infrastructure, in brackets, schools, transportation, water, and sewer are likely to be minimal, these can be addressed through existing policies.
Yes.
I'm wondering if there has been a study conducted to back the statement up. And if we could see that that study that shows this minimal impact that you project on our infrastructure here in Montgomery County.
Sure. So it was the most of the work that we've done is an economic analysis of where we think these are likely to occur. So given the type of units we're talking about, this is, and what we've seen in other jurisdictions, this is likely to occur in the existing tear down, rebuild, replacement home model. That's where it makes economic sense. You're not going to build a quadplex in a mixed use zone that allows you to build a 300-foot tower. And that's what other jurisdictions are showing too. For example, Arlington County. And so the county sees about 200 tear down rebuilds a year. So we would expect that at most we would see 200 of these a year. And that's comparable to what other jurisdictions are seeing too. Like I said, Arlington, for example, had 74 in the first year. That is we're mostly looking at other jurisdictions. And we did some economic analysis in the report on that topic.
Thank you. I think that all of us know that, well, at least some of us are living in aging homes, that when we sell our homes will be ripe for tear down and redevelopment. I don't know what the statistics are in our small community of Martin's Additions, but I know that I live behind 2 lots where we have seen massive new buildings go up that are being sold. 2 of them are being sold for $4 million each. The other one, I'm told, might be valued between $5 million and $7 million. I don't know. That's purely speculative. I have no basis for that. However, I will tell you, these are huge buildings that resemble cruise ships, each one of them. And as a resident who's been living in the village for 20 years, I have seen a huge increase in stormwater as a result of this construction. That is not regulated by current policies. And in fact, I was told by the inspector when we had, because these 50-year storms by, that under which these policies calculate stormwater, and now are now happening regularly every month. So when we had a huge amount of stormwater come from one property all the way down to our property, right in front of our property, and I'm talking about, a foot of water with carrying sediment. The inspector jumped in immediately to address the sediment issue. However, he told us very specifically that there's nothing he can do about the water if it's clean. It's not a problem as far as the county is concerned. But it is an issue as far as this village is concerned, because it affects the quality of our streets, it affects the fact that we can't go outside because we have rivers in front of our homes. It affects our safety in the winter when people slide on that water, and we've had a number of falls actually because of icing in front of our homes. So and it affects the quality of our houses. When our houses get submerged underwater, we actually had to redo a basement because of one construction project on the side of our house. So I think it's slightly misleading to say that there will be no impacts on infrastructure, and even if there's smaller growth. Even if we don't see at the beginning that many construction projects, over time, we are seeing impacts on the infrastructure, and that needs to be studied. And it begs also for any changes to the zoning to be incorporated within a master plan.
Sure, you're absolutely right. We are going to look at this issue every 2 to 4 years. We don't know the exact time yet, the initial check-in for 2 years, to understand like what impacts we are seeing in our neighborhoods. If we are seeing increased frequency, then we have existing processes where we can make changes. And we totally agree with you on the stormwater management. Stormwater management is not an issue that's specific to this. This is an ongoing countywide issue that needs to be studied separately outside this issue, but also part of the conversation. So yes, we agree.
So Lisa, I do want to yield my time, but what I would say is I feel that you're putting the cart before the horse in changing the zoning before the 2-year study has been conducted, because we know there's already a problem. And I'm going to yield my time to other residents. Thank you, Lisa.
Sure, thank you. The 2-year study would actually be on the implications of the implementation of it, but we can't study impacts if we don't have any built. But yeah.
Right. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, next question. It looks like Hiromi and Doug, you have your hand up and you're off mute. Good. You live next to the said cruise ships, so go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa, for your presentation and for taking so much time with us. And thanks so much for the council and everybody attending there today. Just to follow up with a couple of questions. You mentioned, Lisa, the economic analysis that has been done to arrive at the statement that Yasmina mentioned on the website, that the impacts would be minimal. Could you let us know where that economic analysis is available? And
Sure. I'm gonna look it up. So it's a little misleading where it is. I think there's a lot of work about like where we think it's likely to be done in the gentrification and displacement section of the report, but I can I'll double check that.
Yeah, especially on the housing shortage, how you came about to that conclusion, and then also impact on the infrastructure. You must have done some kind of study. So if you could, that either later or now, just give us a link to those sites would be great.
Sure, I'll put a link in the chat to the report.
Thank you. And also you referred to taking a look at the 2 to 4 year mark and the 2 to 4 year check-ins where all of this will be examined. Clearly, then you would have a procedure and a timeline established, a list of items that would be looked at, and that there would be some planning for those that would have not only been developed but also formally approved prior to undertaking any of this. Could you let us know both where we can find the detailed plan for those check-ins and also the process by which the formal process by which it either has been or will be approved, by whom, and where there will be opportunities for public comment, which I'm certain, and public input, which I'm certain is required under the law.
Sure. So let me start with the check-in. So there's actually really only a really short paragraph on the report about the check-ins that just states the time frame and that ultimate elements will be decided when we have a zoning text amendment that shows the scope of the changes. Arlington tonight, I mentioned Arlington came and they're having an annual survey, and I thought, well, maybe we should actually do it annually instead of 2 to 4 years. And they talked about the elements that they had. They're going to try to get like demographics to the extent possible, production numbers, impact on infrastructure, things like that we'll look in, but I don't have the details right now. In terms of process for a zoning text amendment, so generally what happens is a zoning text amendment is introduced at the county council level, or for example, if the county council's asked the planning board to write a zoning text amendment, then a zoning text amendment would be introduced at the county council level at the request of the planning board. So after that zoning text amendment is introduced, a public hearing is set. It's also sent to the planning board. So the planning board will have a public hearing on the zoning text amendment. Staff will make its initial recommendations, and then we will transmit those recommendations to the county council in preparation for their public hearing. So after the planning board public hearing, there would be a county council public hearing. And that, and we would, share our thoughts there, but also anyone that signs up could either, come or send in written testimony. After the public hearing, the zoning text amendment would then enter committee work sessions. So there's a smaller committee of the county council called the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, which is 3 members of the county council. It's Andrew Friedson, Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, and Will Jawando. And then they would deliberate on the zoning text amendment and decide if it would be voted out of committee. If it is voted out of committee, then it would go to the full council, and the full council would then deliberate through work sessions. And then finally, the county council, the full council would vote on that zoning text amendment to either pass it or not pass it. And then it would, you would then, only then would you write, it would be integrated into the zoning code. This is not a short process. When we did accessory dwelling units in 2019, the zoning text amendment was introduced in January, and then it was passed in July. And that was a lot less complicated than this zoning text amendment would be if there is one written. So it would be it would probably be, I would say, 9 months after introduction that there would be a vote. And again, there's no zoning text amendment written at this time, so I can't really speak to the scope of it and how long it is.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that. That's helpful. I actually was focused a little bit more specifically on the 2 to 4 year check-ins, which you in this call have been placing rather great emphasis on in terms of the important role that they would play in addressing all the issues that have been raised today. And I know it's not your intent in mentioning those to simply kick the can down the road on those issues. So therefore, there would have to be at this stage some pretty deliberate and detailed thinking and documentation of exactly what those 2 to 4 year check-ins would do, contain, look at, and how all the procedures under which they would be undertaken would be formalized and approved, and by whom, because 2 to 4 years, as we all know, creeps up pretty quickly. So I'm just wanted an indication from you as to what the plans were on to address those issues. And then I've got one more just very small detailed question on a specific detail.
You bring up a fair point. I can't say that we've had extensive conversations on the check-ins just because it's really hard when we don't know the scope of the zoning text amendment. So, the council member and the council president and the committee have been very clear that the role right now is we are listening. We are in the listening phase for these listening sessions. And so there hasn't been a real appetite to really discuss a zoning text amendment at this point. I imagine that, that will change after the listening sessions, and then maybe we'll discuss what those check-ins will look at when we talk about the scope of the zoning text amendment. And I'm more than happy to follow up with you when I know more. I just don't know more at this time.
And I would assume you would agree that until we can say more about the 2 to 4 year check-ins, then they really don't at this stage carry any weight or address any of the issues, given that there really doesn't seem to be any substance to them at this point. One question back to the specific question back to the parking. You referred to in terms of determining the requirements for parking spaces, that you were basing that on whether or not street parking is allowed. Can you tell us how you are making the determination between street parking being allowed and street parking being available? Because just because street parking is allowed does not mean that there are parking spaces on the streets.
Available.
Yeah.
So from my understanding, and working, we've had this chat with Department of Permitting Services, is that it's just if it's allowed, it's not available. Even if it's allowed on one side of the street and not the other, it would still be considered allowed.
And some others have said there is no correspondence on many streets in the village that street parking be allowed mean is actually street parking.
Understood.
Right. Well, thank you, Lisa. It looks like there aren't any other hands raised. Well, maybe one. Marty, is that a new hand?
Yes, that's a new hand, and thank
new
you so
hand.
much. This is
Lisa, do you have time for one more question?
Sure, I do. The building does close at 9, but so no, so I can take one more question because we have like 15 minutes, but I do have to be out of here by 9. Sorry.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. Okay, Marty, she has to be out of there by 9. So
I appreciate this, and Lisa, we appreciate you putting in a long night here at the office. My question is about litigation. You've mentioned that I know, I guess there's Arlington's being sued. I believe Alexandria is being sued. I understand the places like Minneapolis are being sued. From, my limited knowledge, I'm an economist, not an attorney, but it looks like every jurisdiction that has approved this removal of single family housing, which is basically, in my opinion, a field day for developers, has been sued. And I would much rather, as a taxpayer and a longtime resident of Montgomery County, not to mention VMA, I would much rather see my tax dollars used to actually produce affordable and missing middle housing in White Flint, or, in downtown Bethesda with that empty office space, or where, than to spend it on litigation. So that leads me back to the point that a number of people made, which is this is such a huge change, the zoning change, that it should be handled through the formal, rigorous process of the master plan, not as a ZTA, not as a zoning text amendment. And I think that the more rigorous the process is from the planning board, the less likely we are to waste money on litigation, because we'll be able to deal with all this through the much more detailed process of the master plan. And so I would switch from a ZTA model at all if I were you, and tell for your own self-preservation and sanity, tell the council to do this through the master plan. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I mean that we've heard that before. I mean, I hope we don't get sued. I don't think every jurisdiction has been sued. There are a number of them that have, but I think regionally, yes. But it's still, it's very new, and there hasn't been a lot of jurisdictions that have like made these changes and seen sustained results of what those look like. I think, Minneapolis was 2020, and that was like the first big one. So there hasn't been a lot of time that's passed. I just want, the master plan process is part of this, especially for the large scale recommendations where we want to do those, go parcel by parcel, segment by segment. I think, the planning board is, I know you think we don't have a housing supply crisis, but the planning board is very focused on addressing what they believe is a housing shortage and addressing the need for more diverse types of housing in the county. But thank you for your comment.
Let's build the housing instead of destroying the current neighborhoods. There are plenty of places to build the housing without touching a single family neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you again for your time. We want you to get home safely and I hope you feel better. Sorry you were under the weather earlier this week.
Thank you from the Village Council for showing up.
Yes,
Thank you.
yeah.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're a good sport. I was gonna say you're welcome to stay on for the meeting, but I think you need some downtime. So,
Thank you. But
thanks again.
I'll make the presentation available to you and you can send it out and it has my contact information.
And if someone's question didn't get answered or you thought of something when you leave, Lisa, they can contact you and you'll just specify you're from the VMA. Okay. Thank you again. Maybe one day you'll come visit us.
I hope so.
All right. Thank you, Lisa.
Good.
Okay.
Just say those were all great questions.
Yes.
Everyone.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
solid
Really.
questions.
Very
Yeah.
thoughtful.
Thank you. Those are really good community engagement. Thank you so much. So I was going to do a little reshuffling of the agenda. The next item, we had a discussion and possible vote to sign onto a letter asking the state to clarify state code 20-509 regarding municipal building code authority. I was going to jump to a next item because Andrew has joined us. He is on the phone because he's made it. We had a quorum anyway, but Andrew's nice enough to join us he's made it, he survived middle school, the middle school halls, 7 periods, or is it 8? I forget. Anyway, I guess we could take it up. I'm trying to text Jeff and see if he could join us, but I don't think he's ready yet. So why don't we just jump to approving the July 18th council meeting minutes. Will buy him some time that way. Have you all had a chance
Yes.
to?
Yeah, and I'll move to approve the minutes.
Excellent.
Second.
A second. Okay. Is there, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Andrew, are you ayes? Okay, we got 4. Perfect. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Okay, I'm still waiting for Jeff. I was giving him till 9 o'clock. So why don't we move on next? Since we have people in the room, I'm going to announce the FY25 committees and task forces, if you don't mind. Okay. We have some members. Yes. All right. So yeah, I want to recognize the residents who have stepped up to volunteer for FY 2025 committees and our extended task forces. I mean, before I read the names, I'm going to apologize if I botch any pronunciations of last names. So please feel free to correct me. I was just going to say, volunteers are crucial to the VMA. It takes a village to run this village. On that note, I found this quote. It's American author Elizabeth Andrews. She said, "Volunteers do not necessarily have the time. They just have the heart." Mm-hmm. And that makes me think of you all. So I think that is true of the residents that are they are the heart of this community. And there were 23 residents who have been appointed by the council to help this community. And I'm going to I'm going to say all the committees and name of the committee members alphabetically. So I hope I got it right. All right. So I'm going to start with anti-Semitism Education Awareness Task Force. And thank you to Nathaniel Edelstein. He's returning. Sarah Fink. She is new to the committee and recently moved to the neighborhood. So welcome to Sarah. We also have returning Dara Freiling and another new member, Michael Lieberman, and their council liaison will be Andrew. So that is the Anti-Semitism Education Awareness Task Force. Next, we have the Community Engagement Committee. This is our largest group of volunteers because we're not putting a cap on fun, right? We're the fun committee. And this is known as the fun committee, and it will include, of course, returning Keith Allen, right? Paul McGowan returning. Susan Mitchell, I think she's new, or was she new? Did she join last?
She's come to a lot of meetings.
Okay, so she's new on the committee. In the room, Yasmina Mudaris. Okay, all right. Okay. Barbara Sachs Singer, I think she's previously served, but she's new this year. David Salter, and I'm not going to say this right. Mark Shamil. He's new. He's a new member. And the co-liaisons will be myself and Susan Faddig. So thank you, CEC. I think we already have an event on the books. It's the Halloween party and parade. It's October 27th. Is that right, Michael? Sunday, yes. October 27th. Okay. And then the election committee. We have some returning and new additions. There only 4 members for now, because that was the only number who answered the call for volunteers that was advertised for several weeks, multiple times by our village staff, and I gotta give them a shout out. And we also responded to, expressed interest that was directly sent to the council. So, but, the council is open to appointing a 5th member if there is an interested candidate, but we just didn't have one as of tonight. So, and believe me, I called around. I called lots of people. Okay. Okay. So welcome to new member Elizabeth Goldberg, and welcome back to Marty Langland, Naomi Nyerman, and another new addition this year is Larry Wasson. Okay, so thank you to those members that will be serving on this year's election committee. Your co-liaisons will be Arthur and Jeff. Okay, and then the ethics committee, we welcome back returning member Alex. Is it
Guesquier.
Guesquier, thank you. A new member, George McAleese. Did I say his name? McAleese, good. And returning member, Lori Mitchell. Thank you to the residents serving on the ethics committee. The council liaison will be Susan, and possibly you might have a co with Andrew, because he expressed interest if you're open to that. Okay, he is offered to co-liaison. And he hasn't spoken up, so I'm speaking for him. All right.
So sign him up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put him down. There you go. And then the Stormwater and Groundwater Task Force will have returning member Phil Hurst, and new additions Elizabeth Goldberg, and Yasmina again is a new member. And we will have returning members Mark Schaefer and Camille Wall. The task force co-liaisons will be that dynamic duo again, Arthur and Jeff. Okay. And then last but certainly not least, our tree supervisor will be Paula Goldberg. And so thank you for volunteering and for your patience while we confirmed everyone's appointment. And next up, you'll be hearing from Michael about the paperwork and an orientation date, and then probably from your liaisons about the first meeting. Is that right? Good? All right.
Michael, make sure they all get the mission statements of their committee
Yes.
and the committee guidelines.
Committee guidelines, and we have an orientations hopefully scheduled. So I'll be emailing everyone tomorrow with all of that information.
Good. And people in the room where it happens, does anyone want to join a committee or express interest?
I have to go home.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, I need help with my homework. Thank you. No, thanks you so much for your questions tonight. Okay. Let's see. Have we heard from Jeff yet? I'm multitasking. I'm texting and okay, and not yet. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna speaking committees, I'm gonna jump to the next item, and that is the council was this is the review of the FY24 election committee recommendations. So the council was presented with recommendations by the outgoing FY 2024 election committee. So I just named the FY 2025 election committee, but these were suggested by last year's committee. Some of the members, returning to this year. And so at the last council meeting, the recommendations were on the agenda, but we ourselves were at an impasse. We had 2 council members had to leave earlier due to other obligations. So I made a decision to just move the item to this month. And again, we are challenged with, we were challenged again with 2 possibly missing council members tonight. So I have had one-on-one discussions with each council member, and they've all thoroughly reviewed all 9 proposed recommendations. And so I have a suggestion, we have a suggestion for moving forward. Last year's election committee worked very well together, and it was a successfully run election, and it produced stability and a stable plan. And it's for this reason we recommend the election committee this year use the same plan as last year with simple changes like updating of the dates. And as for the 9 recommendations, I heard from my colleagues, and the consensus is that 2 of these recommendations can be suggested for FY 2025 election committee, 2 out of the 9. And those include number 1, a reasonable procedure for recounts and the election regulations. However, the majority of the council members I spoke to about this one, they indicated they would prefer the state's 5% standard and not the less than 10 votes language. And then the second recommendation is to update the election regulations to reinstate the mandatory drop box on election day. And so to be clear, these are recommendations for the FY 2025 election plan, and this plan is a regulation and not an ordinance, although several of the 9 proposed recommendations would have required a change to the village charter. And so therefore, none of the recommendations that would require a change to the village charter received enough support. So I know that's not the outcome that the returning election committee members would like. However, a no at this time doesn't mean never, and these recommendations can be proposed in future election plans. So, and in fact, and correct me if I'm wrong, and we have Ron on, right? Some of the recommendations, they can go into this year's regulations for approval without a change to the village charter. So for example, the election cycle was extended to 75 days by the committee last year, and it was approved by the council. So the same request can be made this year without changing the village charter. So that's that, and we're going to move to the next agenda item. And if there are comments about the election recommendations, we're going to hear them in the final resident comment section. All right, do we have Jeff yet? Okay, let me check. No, not yet. All right, so next we're going to discussion of adopting a county hazard mitigation plan resolution. Michael, would you like, is that you
Yeah,
or me?
that's me, and
Yeah.
Ron is also online.
Okay.
The and Ron, help me out if I'm wrong here. It is on page 8 in your packet tonight. Every jurisdiction in the country is adopting a hazard mitigation plan, and the county has already done that. And they have just asked for all municipalities in the county to sign on to their plan, and that comes with the benefit of one, streamlined procedures if there was a natural or otherwise disaster in this area. But it would also mean that we could apply for federal grants in that case, whether that's FEMA grants to come in if something happened or something like that. So it's kind of just a procedure. We're just all being asked to sign on to it. Ron, correct me if any of that was wrong.
No, that's all correct. So jurisdictions are required to have hazard mitigation plan. We're obviously too small to come up with our own, so we have the benefit of being able to join the county's plan, as Michael stated. The village is already a participant with our last resolution in 2019 adopting the county's plan, but as the county has amended its plan, it's requiring a new resolution by the village and others.
Good, okay, let's do it.
So do I make a motion
We need a
to?
motion and a second, and then
I move to
Okay.
adopt the resolution to adopt the Montgomery County Hazard Mitigation Plan of 2024.
I'll second. Yep.
Oh,
Oh,
Katie can have it.
I'll second. All right. All in favor?
aye.
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 And there's
Andrew
Andrew.
says aye.
There he says Andrew. All right. And then, okay, well, I can't hold this much longer, so.
I think we're.
We're gonna just go back. Okay, so, and then you all will be interested in this because you just participated so nicely in the questions with our guests. So this is a discussion and possible signing onto a letter asking the state to clarify code 20-509 regarding municipal building code authority. So this is an update about an effort the council has considered joining. As you may recall, just for some background for anyone who's new to this, the council voted to move into a closed session at the end of the June council meeting to receive legal advice regarding the issue in building regulations per the Open Meetings Act. And we also discussed the possibility of the addition of our signature as a municipality on a letter to the state senator and the state delegation requesting a technical amendment to the state code. So the amendment seeks to confirm that municipalities have the authority to regulate all residential housing types within their corporate boundaries without impeding any specific housing type. So this is an effort that is being organized by the town of Chevy Chase. And most of the neighboring municipalities, Section 3, Section 5, I know they've already agreed to sign on this letter, which will be sent at the end of the month. Is that correct? And the deadline to respond was actually today, and we got an extension till tomorrow. Okay, I asked for an extension. So, before we move to vote on, whether to add our DMA signature, I want to open it up to you all.
And Katie, I have a
Oh, and
comment
Ron.
I have a comment that might shorten the amount of discussion we have to have. So there are 11 signatories so far. We have received comments, requests for edits to the language here and there. And we're thinking now that it would be best to simplify the text so that it is more basic and can have support by all 11 signatories rather than going back and forth, amending text here and there to try and get everyone on board. So with these edits, I think we are going to remove, any concern that Martin's Additions council members would have, as noted by Councilmember Blander at our last meeting. So his concern would be addressed. We would just keep the letter very simple. Here's why we're doing this, and here's the proposed text, and that's it. And, municipalities don't have to at this time make any representation as to whether or not they support affordable or multifamily housing.
Okay.
So Ron, is that the text we have in front of us now?
Yeah, is that
No, this is all happening in
old
real time. Yeah, we're just
Okay.
making these discussions an hour ago. And
Okay. So
we
how
hope
should
to
we
get
proceed
another
here?
draft out tomorrow. So it'll either be, well, it's the letter before you with a few sentences deleted,
Okay,
just to make it more generic. And
okay,
we'll either do that approach or just let each of the 11 municipalities send in their own letter with whatever text they want. That approach would take more time. So
Right.
we think it's probably best just to simplify this letter. We're going to delete some sentences in 3 locations. And so
which
tonight you could just reaffirm your
Uh-huh.
support for the general concept.
Okay.
I reaffirm our support for the general
Well,
concept.
just quickly, Ron, would you be able to tell
Yeah,
us what
which
those
sentences?
sentences are that would be deleted?
Yes, absolutely.
That would help.
Okay.
And anyone at home, this letter is on the
I think
packet.
it's out
Yeah.
of here. I don't see the objective.
So in the third paragraph that begins to fulfill the state law's intent, is
Yeah.
everybody with me?
Yeah.
We would delete the last sentence of that paragraph
It is important.
and the last or the second half of the second to last sentence, beginning with "nor do we intend." So all that would be deleted, those
Okay,
3
so we would
lines.
Back out, nor do we intend.
That's right.
Okay,
And then in the next paragraph, we would just end the sentence with Regional District Act and delete the second half after the comma.
okay, okay,
And then second to last paragraph, we just delete that in its entirety. There are 2 significant.
right, okay. I would be willing to support
Yeah,
that right now.
Okay.
I would as well.
So Andrew, I don't know if you're in a place to talk or if you would like to. Is he still on the phone? Oh, yeah, there he is.
Yeah,
Andrew,
I'm
would you-
here. I'm
Yeah.
here. That,
Got
that
your
all
letter with
sounds,
you?
that all sounds good to me. I appreciate flexibility there.
Good. So can we just,
Well, I mean, let's,
Just joining the meeting.
okay, he is, okay. All right, well, that's fine. I mean, that's interesting, they're striking that one sentence. That was my favorite sentence of the letter, but I still think signing this letter for anyone who's interested here still on call, it's getting a seat at a table, and we're building a team, a coalition, and there are strength in numbers. And that said, I mean, I think there's this misconception out there in the community that we're throwing away our individual rights as a municipality, and that's not true. It's just a letter, and we can still have our own game plan, correct? And But I believe joining this combined effort will be more of a help than a hindrance to our community in the long run. And so I think signing the letter is a no-brainer. Okay, so should we make a motion? Jeff, does Jeff wanna?
We probably need to catch Jeff up just to explain what
Yeah.
happened. Ron, can you repeat yourself for Jeff?
Yes, yeah, Jeff, can you hear me?
Crystal clear.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, so just explaining that we're now at the point on the agenda where we're talking about the letter to our delegates requesting an amendment of state law regarding municipal building regulation authority. And based on the difficulty in arriving at a one-size-fits-all letter for our 11 signatories, we're thinking it would probably be best just to simplify the text of the letter, delete the sentences that there's been debate about the best way to word, including the sentences that you raised as concerns, Jeff. So just deleting those altogether and just keeping the letter simple to state that we'd like this clarified and here's our proposed text. And we don't have to get into whether each individual jurisdiction at this time supports multifamily housing or not. And the other alternative would be to have each municipality send in its own letter, but that would take more time and so probably not the best option. And instead simplify the letter.
Okay.
And to further piggyback onto Katie's point, so this is not a letter to the county council on the upcoming ZTAs. This is a letter regarding a state law, which dates back to the 1990s, which says we can regulate or impose setbacks, height, mass, scale requirements, etc., on single-family buildings on land zoned for single-family use. At the time when the authority was first given in 1991 or 1992 for setbacks, of course, we were only dealing with single-family homes. We think the intent was to grant us authority to regulate all residential construction, regardless of what's going on indoors. And so we want to get that clarified. That's again not a letter to the county council on the ZTAs. The village has not taken a position on that, and we'll continue to discuss that issue.
So briefly, Jeff, it meets your concerns.
Yeah, better said. Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah, and let me just say to everyone, thank you so much. Ron, thank you for that explanation, and also Katie and Arthur and Susan and Andrew. I mean, again, I know I've shared some thoughts, and in very short order, it sounds like without getting into too much of the weeds, but that one concern about that one half sentence, if that's part of the sanitation of it, to just focus on the state level issue and then perhaps remove or further sanitize things that might be a little bit, whether out of scope or just a little bit beyond this, that's great. And so I'm assuming that what Arthur validated was that one half sentence that I had some concerns on as part of that, which is awesome.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
I'm 1,000% behind it, and I'm grateful to all your work.
Yeah, we would just delete that sentence instead of trying to figure out a way to make it acceptable to all 11 of our signatories. Just delete it altogether.
Well, then that seems like, yeah. Oh, sorry, Jeff. What was that?
Oh, may I just like 30 seconds or less on something, and then turn it back over? Is that okay? Or please go ahead.
Well, it sounded like we were about ready to vote, but yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to just, and again, this could be a continued discussion, not tonight, but the one thing that I have shared, I think, is maybe not necessarily concern, but more of effectualization, is does this letter really, will it be worth kind of its weight with the idea of, you know, who do we know authentically is behind this, whether it's governor's office or delegates or even our own president of the county council, because, you know, the idea is a letter's fine, but if we don't really have folks behind this for us, you know, I don't think this is the end of the job, is what I'm saying.
No, it's a long.
Well, this
Yeah,
is-
this is the first
This is
step.
the first step, right?
This is a-
right.
Yeah, so there has been
target.
discussions, Mayor Lane from the town of Chevy
Me too.
Chase has been discussing this
Yeah.
issue for many months with
Yes.
delegates Solomon, Shetty, and Kaufman,
Mhm.
you know, who we're hoping will sponsor the bill for us.
Yeah.
And
Right. All right,
And
well,
the-
Okay,
yeah,
let's-
let's, should I make the motion first, or I'm gonna,
You sure can.
all right, I'm gonna I make the motion to, adopt, to sign, the letter asking the state to clarify state code 20-509 regarding municipal building code authority. Is there a second?
I would just say as amended.
As amended, as amended,
Okay.
okay. Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
aye,
I,
Mhm.
good,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, all right. Well, and Jeff.
so I
while we
believe you're
have-
sending me home, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Ron, it's always a pleasure, but
All
yes,
right.
if you would like, if you
If
would like
if
to
you're
go.
not already home, go home.
My
Yeah.
building closes at 9:15. I gotta go.
You too? Okay. All right, get home safe too. You're there. All right, well, since we have you, Jeff, with a treasurer's report, are you in a place to talk? Or-
I am, and in probably about 4 seconds, you're going to
Oh,
see me.
I hear him in the
So
hallway.
I could do it as I'm going up the hall or when I walk into the room.
We can buy
So
you some time till you actually come in.
maybe a little background
Yeah, we
music
can
there.
make an entrance.
Yeah, not to make a grand entrance, as they say, but here we go.
Oh, but he is.
Thanks.
There he is.
Thanks. This is where you are.
Yeah. Pull up a chair.
Yes, because you need a comp. Yeah, you're on, you have to do the echo.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jeff. Do you need a copy of your report?
Oh, I can look on with Arthur.
Okay. All right. Oh, John. All right. Okay.
Excellent. Well, we'll make this really short. We are in good shape. Again, thanks to all those who have served on the council in prior years and in current. So, you know, the details are there. I'm not going to extend too much. There's no surprises. We're on the mark of both income expenses, you know, they're not necessarily prorated per month. So you're going to see a little bit of dips here in terms of whether or not we've had the full expenses versus income. But again, there's no real concerns. I think the only thing to point out in sort of just the bullets real quick underneath in terms of follow-up, I think we're going to continue we have the ARPA funds, you know, that need to be expended. So we're just going to be on top of that because they have to be done by December. Michael, you are phenomenal when it comes to everything, but of course, preparing for the audit. So that has already started, and we'll have the normative working sessions with the community and really looking forward to that. We had a few who attended last year, but those who did, they really provided some great inputs. I think there'll be a proposal that we know from the stormwater task force that we'll entertain. And then finally, I think with everything that we had just gone through regarding the letter and the presentations we had tonight with the possibility of rezoning, you know, is there anything that we may consider, not today, not tomorrow, but perhaps in the months ahead, around understanding how this might impact budget in the future? Because again, if we were focused on just where we are today and where we're going in the future when it comes to single family zoning, I think everyone is in agreement that we are in really fabulous shape. But if all of a sudden we are looking at perhaps higher density, new construction, you know, what will that impact be on infrastructure? Do we need to expand the staff? You know, so there may be some things that we have to think about and what that might mean for our finances. But other than that, we're in good shape right now.
Great. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Michael, your manager's report?
Okay. That was nice and short. Mine is very long. And I didn't even include some things, because some additional things have happened. So let me start with those. I forgot to mention that I'm leaving on Sunday for my annual conference. It's in Pittsburgh this year with the International City County Management Association. I think there's about 4,000 city managers from all over the country and world that will be there. So that's my professional development opportunity of the year. So I'm looking forward to that. And I will be gone for most of next week, which means for the committee members that need to sign all of their forms, I will be telling them this tomorrow. There's a clarification on the form this year to sign your oath of office that says it needs to be witnessed, not notarized, but it needs to be witnessed by either the manager, a council member, or the village attorney. The village attorney is not present, so that's either one of you have to witness the form for the volunteers, or I need to do it, which means we'll need to schedule those for once I return back in town. So hold your horses, don't come running into the office trying to sign your forms. We'll schedule those in a week. We will also be trying to schedule the volunteer orientation. If it works for the council members, we need volunteers and Ron and at least a couple council members there to make that a good, productive orientation for everybody this year. And we do have a number of new volunteers, so we want to make sure they're all up to speed on how we do things. And we want to improve some processes that we've talked about internally. So we're hoping that September 30th at 7:30 will work for
Say the date again.
September 30th.
September 30th.
Just a comment on that. I did attend, I know others did, but I thought it was one of the best meetings. It was great. I mean, lots of positive energy, so it definitely encourages many people to show up as they can.
Absolutely. And that's a week from Monday. So, and that will be recorded. So if people can attend, we can always share the recording and make sure they're all up to speed on everything. And we're always here to support all the different committees. So that should be fine. The Halloween party has been scheduled. I know the CEC just got, announced today for this year, but it always happens on the Sunday before Halloween. So that for this year, that's October 27th, and that's always from 3 to 5:30, finishing with a parade around the neighborhood. So that's also upcoming. I'm in contact with, this is new and exciting. I'm in contact with a professor at Georgetown School of Public Management, and they have put up Martin's Editions as a group project for their class of graduate students. So they will be coming to interview me.
We're going to be a case study.
Some administrative best practices in the field of public management. And I think it's really important to include in those types of studies very small communities, because there's a lot of small communities and we often get missed in some of the data and literature. So we'll see what they want to study on. We're going to maybe do a tour, and they're going to look at our charter and go through stuff and see how we operate. And we'll see what they're interested in. They will give us a report when they're done. So Georgetown grad students.
Well, as a former professor there, I can join in with them.
Maybe they should interview Arthur.
Halloween parade.
Oh, yes, invite him.
They might have some critiques of that. Yeah. Okay, so now to the regular scheduled agenda, which is the report that's in your packet on page 12. Under administration, as Jeff just said, the audit is underway. I think I've uploaded over 100 documents to their portal, which is not super user friendly, but we're all okay. Everything's fine. Including there's a couple invoices I was pulling today that they couldn't find. So we have everything. We're all good so far. Second, the village insurance policies for the year have been renewed, or those are all squared away. There are requests for proposals for the stormwater management task force study that we're hoping to get underway this year. Was posted last month. I've gotten a number of several interested engineers asking questions in my inbox. So we'll get all those people answered and hopefully get them all to submit applications for that study. We also have renewal contracts in hand for the fall street cleaning and winter snow plowing. Those are exactly the same as last year, no changes in price. So I think those are just an easy sign. No additional costs there. And as a reminder for snow removal, we are also have all public sidewalks will be snow plowed for snowstorms over a couple inches. So that's a new service we added last year, but then we never actually had any snow last year. So I'm excited to see how that will work this year, but that will be in the contract again this year. And I already mentioned this, but now that the task forces and committees have been appointed for FY 25, we will need to have everyone complete their forms, schedule orientation, which we have done, and then schedule their first meetings, hopefully in October. And then on to maintenance, just 3 things on maintenance. It was mentioned earlier, village trees have had a very hard year. It's been a very dry year, and I'm a big time gardener, so I can tell you, it's not just us, trees everywhere are struggling, but we had several trees come down on Raymond Street, including knocking out power at one point. And we had a scary situation where a tree actually fell on a house with a mother and her child in the house at the time, on Taylor Street. So, we're aware of all those situations and dealing with them, emergency situations like that. I can tell you our arborist is very quick at responding and was on the scene within an hour in both of those situations. So that's really good. We realize we want to improve both the way we plant trees in the village, and also like an annual maintenance idea that in the winter come through and go down each street and kind of make sure everything's looking good. More for the aesthetic stuff versus the scary, risky situations. Okay. 2, we do have a subcontractor for our traffic engineer who has been performing our sidewalk and pothole repair. That seems to be working really well for small jobs, but if we ever have a really large issue or several at the same time, we'll need to hire a more formal paving company.
Do we have one in mind?
We do not. I looked around at paving companies and they try to exhibit and try to sell stuff to me all the time. But I haven't done a full proposal, but we also don't have a large job. The pothole on Raymond Street that kept reoccurring, I got WSSC to fill it 3 times, but it kept reforming because their contractors don't know what they're doing, I think. So then this contractor actually was able to dig out the entire hole and fill it and fix it correctly. And it seems to be done right this time. Do it right and you never have to do it again. Parking enforcement, Arthur's on all these emails, so he knows. I'm still following up with the County Department of Parking Enforcement. Apparently, there was an agreement signed between Martin's Additions and the county in 1997. I've looked through our files. I've asked people that are familiar with files, including Gene Sperling. We do not have any record of that in hand. The county is currently going through their attorney's office and the state and county archives to try to find a copy of that.
Can't we just start over again?
I have been asking them that, like, well, can we just sign a new one or can we just, and I haven't gotten a clear response, as you've seen, Arthur. So anyways, that's still pending. We really need to have parking enforcement. So that's kind of needs to happen, one way or the other. Project updates, unless there was a question there. No, okay.
No.
There's a lot of projects. I feel like in the summer, I starting all these different projects that I've had on a list. And then because things were a little bit slow around here and now fall is here and things are picking back up and I haven't actually completed most of these projects. But the Brookville sidewalk, we have hired a second surveyor to try to complete the job. They have also run into problems, but they're confident that they were almost there with the final surveys at 6 different addresses. Specifically, one block seems to be causing some problems, trying to figure out where the historic lines are and matching that up with all the different surveys. But I did speak with our engineer, Clark Azar and Associates, and he has started conversations with the State Highway Administration, and they are hoping to go to permitting the 2nd week of October. Yay, next phase. At that point, he'll have a plan that's completed, that we'll be able to walk all of our residents through, and maybe some sort of special meeting to walk everyone through what that plan looks like, so everyone's on board with it. And that permitting process takes about 6 months at State Highway, but State Highway has told me they will speed this up and are supportive of this. This is kind of a no-brainer, small thing for them, especially because we're paying for it. And at the same time that we're waiting for our state permits, we can start trying to get county waivers for sediment control and some other issues with the county. And we can also put out the RFP for the actual paving contractor, which will be the next big paving contract that we'll have. So that would be a one-off paving contractor for just that job. And we'll see how much that actually costs. But probably around $250,000 to actually do the paving portion of that job. So this is the biggest single project we've done in quite a long time.
You may mention that the surveyors, no one sure where any of the lines are.
It's very
The
confusing.
private lines, the state lines, where properties
There's
are.
actually monuments mounted in the sidewalk at points, and all of those are wrong. The elevations that are listed on those sites are inconsistent to other surveys. People have plat informations that are different that we're looking up. Yeah, it's an art, not a science. And also, their license are on the line. So if they say something is true and it turns out not to be true, they could lose their license. So they're very careful about saying something. And they have to, if they really can't figure it out, I finally got them to say what you do in the case where you literally can't figure it out is you just say, what's the most reasonable guess is. And you have to kind of, yeah. So we'll see what comes of that. That's the Brookville sidewalk. The resident directory, as you'll remember, we hired Julian Lampier, the contractor that worked for the election committee last year on our voter roll. He has completed a first review of our complete resident directory. We really want to have every adult resident, everyone over the 18 living in the village, and we want to have all their contact information for the printed resident directory. So the next phase of this project will be reaching out to everybody, asking them to update their information, because we know a lot of people's phone numbers have changed. And for other reasons, what I'll get into in a minute, we also want people's cell phone numbers, because that could end up being very helpful. So I will be doing that portion of it. And then I'm working with a design firm, Ironmark, to actually design and professionally print next year's, this year's resident directory. And that leads into our mass notification software. Katie's been hoping for this and wanting this for a long time. But we are moving out of the 19th century and into the 21st century and getting rid of constant contact. We have to get rid of constant contact. I have found a group that was recommended to me from the manager of the Village of Friendship Heights in the area, who swears up and down that this is the best mass notification software that they've ever seen. They will allow residents to opt in to receive village communications in any way they want, including they'll have an app for us. They will text you, they will call you. I can send it from anywhere. So we're really excited about that, and we're ready to set up that contract as soon as our resident directory is done, so that we can just sync our resident directory directly with it. So there's no one left out.
Right.
Everyone's on it.
Love it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the resident directory and the mass notification software, which is why we need everyone's cell phone number, because we'll be asking people if they want to receive communications via text. We can also receive alerts for inclement weather and other things on there as well. And that's kind of what they specialize in, is like emergency response type stuff.
So for the residents who like to remain anonymous and not provide like that information, they're just not going to be
Correct.
included. Yeah.
When I ask people to update their information, if they haven't shared their information publicly before,
Yeah.
I'll ask them again if they would like to share their information publicly. But if they don't,
They
then
don't
they
go on
don't.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they won't be
Yeah.
publicly contacted or printed in the directory.
Right.
But they can't opt just to receive the text or to receive the regroup alerts. I mean, they can't just opt out of the directory and still
You
receive.
can't opt out of my internal list, because I have an internal list, but I won't be publishing that list anywhere
Right.
without consent.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then that also gets to the newsletter. The newsletter, as pretty as we've made it look, is currently designed in constant contact, which means when we try to print it, when I try to mail it to the other towns, when I try to do all of those things, it doesn't work. Which means we need to move into the 21st century and get rid of constant contact and create an actual professional design of our survey. I talked to Ironmark about this, and they're coming up with a template to train me to use in InDesign from Microsoft to actually design the same exact survey. It's not going to look that different,
Yeah.
but it's going to be in a professional software that then we can print to PDF and print and mail and professionally mail and professionally print. So we're very looking forward to that. The newsletter, as simple as it might seem, takes a massive amount of time from my office to, you know, Erin spends the entire week of a quarter of her time working on that newsletter. That's how hard it is. So we really need to get this done.
Yeah.
Moving on, VMA website is terrible. I think all government websites are terrible, but our website is especially terrible. And we've had several really good recommendations since I've been here, including, I think it was Arthur that recommended we have a page for current construction projects in the village, with maybe even the site plans posted there so everyone can see them. That would be amazing. And I've actually created it on the wall for people online. You can see I have a wall there. Those are the 6 current projects I'm aware of that are in the coming down the pike in the village on the wall. But I wanted to copy that and put that on the website. And Katie came up with the idea of creating a frequently asked questions page, which I get a lot of frequently asked questions. So I would just point people to that link or just copy and paste it from the website and reply to those, you know, 10 emails a day about bulk trash not coming on Quincy
What's
Street.
the number one question that people ask?
Yeah, it fluctuates. When it's bulk trash, it's definitely bulk trash. Before bulk trash, there's about 100 emails, and about after bulk trash, there's about 100 emails. We get trash questions every single week. So I think trash and recycling and it's amazing when we don't get questions. I don't get a single question about composting, which is amazing because that just runs smoothly. No one asks questions. But other issues, other services are not quite as clean as that. The annual survey, this is another really good news. I have been in contact with the University of Maryland's Institute of Governmental Services and Research. They do great work. They are very affordable, especially to compare to the other firm that I looked at. And they do surveys for Greenbelt, for Annapolis. They do this. We can submit the questions that we want asked. They'll design it and word it the way that's professional. They will come and present the data back with us. They will host it on their website. So I'm not creating a little Google form or something. It'll be anonymous, at least from our end, so that they can collect all the demographic data, but none of that gets shared out publicly. And that's, if I get a thumbs up from the council, I will go with that.
Thumbs up.
Okay, awesome. The survey is going to be
6, 8, yeah. I guess Andrew has his thumbs up on it.
okay. That's amazing. I'm going to sign that contract with them tomorrow.
Yeah, they're very, very anxious to be helpful.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, I'm a part of a certificate program that they run through MML, and there's lots of good work, and they're actually supporting municipalities in the state. So that's a great service. The native tree planting program, we have another record year, back-to-back years. I think this might have something to do with Paula Goldberg, our tree supervisor, who's an advocate for planting trees, and maybe me advocating for planting trees.
35 on public property, on private property.
It's a record year with 48 trees total, and 35 of those, as Arthur said, are on private property. So thank you all for accepting trees on your yard. You're saving the planet and making your community better for.
That increase in the number is because we expanded the number of available trees, which is something we might want to consider.
Right. And also,
For the
we
next
used to
budget
charge,
year.
we used to have a nominal fee.
That's true.
Got rid of
The
that.
buy-in,
Right.
skin in the game theory.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We do limit it to 1 per household per year. And that seems to be working really well. And I know some people, you know, think they want a tree and then they back out at the last minute. So that still happens. There was 2 individuals that never responded, originally asked for a tree, but then never followed up with the arborist. So if they do eventually respond, we'll have to put them on next year's list. But and then the last thing, sorry to end on a sad note, 204 Oxford got demolished without me giving them permission to demolish it. They got the county permits, and the subcontractor thought that meant they were cleared to go, and they just started backhoeing. And I showed up on a Wednesday morning and the house is gone. I immediately, with Ron and Doug's help, issued a stop work order. And that's where it currently stands. Doug is reviewing very carefully their plans. And once that we're sure that that application is complete, then we'll need to schedule our resident informational meeting. That has to happen before someone starts a construction project in the village. For anything over 500 square feet, I believe the code says. So that didn't happen in this case. I was really upset that was a bad day. But there's a hold on that project right now until we check all of the boxes.
Okay. No, bye, thank you so much.
And that concludes my report. That was a marathon.
That is a marathon. That's quite a report.
Yeah, I want to take, these are rhetorical, and for follow-up, but I just want to mention again, great report. Couple of quick things, and again, rhetorical, no need to really comment unless someone has a burning thing. So with the task force, I did have a chance to touch base with one of the members and on the stormwater. And so one thing to just consider is, I know we've talked about a fairly sizable amount to conduct this technical study. And I think we can talk about this another time as a council. We probably don't want to delay, but again, what about all that's happening around the zoning? And if we all of a sudden plunk a lot of money into this, and then there is this possibility of rezoning, what does that mean? And how could this data be helpful or not? So I just think it's a consideration. And, so that when there is outreach to the technical advisors, that, how they could make this relevant, even if there is an upzoning. I would want to also mention, I don't know if I'm like a magnet for this, but again, I was here during the day. I had to pick up my dry cleaning, and I literally, I'm walking by the exit on Turner, and a massive SUV just pulls in the wrong way. And, so I just share, but I did look at that and I realized, we don't have a hump or anything there that would slow. So it's just like a straight, it's almost like a ramp. So I just want to put that out there for follow-up, is maybe there is something we could do that's like a calming measure that could just be a hump so that people actually have to slow before they do something like that. That might be something low-hanging fruit. The annual survey, awesome. I know I mentioned this and it's great to have this group, fantastic, is I think we all recognize that the content knowledge is going to be from residents, our committees, and our council members. So just the idea that there is that process of getting some of that feedback. I'm sure that we probably want to have a couple of questions on the upzoning to just get their, get residents to see how they feel, and, also. So I think there's a real opportunity with this group to kind of take that on. Totally. The other thing that I mentioned and I shared is, I think we all are extremely, we know that you'll be able to come up with something, but all this blasting of information around, if there's like a page or some way to just, and again, not reinvent the wheel, because we have a lot of municipalities that have some of them have already set up their own pages. So maybe it's just copy and paste or just refer, but somewhere where people in the village can go that they could just, there's a placeholder on our site of attainable, affordable housing.
It's true. It's an ongoing issue. It's a big issue. We're going to be talking about it in each council meeting probably from here on out. But Michael, you're getting inundated with requests and information of sessions. So he's doing a great job of, getting the word out, still in constant contact, but also, when it comes to, we have to have, and I've reached out to the council too on this, love to know your thoughts. Some of these events, it's kind of like all or nothing. Should we, and sometimes, when you receive this information, if there's an event like that evening, you might not be in a place or able to drop everything right then and post it. So I think we need to get some organization on this. A place on the site, maybe on the new website would be good, like a go-to page on attainable housing, or thoughts on what we advertise on these sessions, like the ones that are hosted from fellow municipalities. Like tonight was, when we had Lisa speak, this was very VMA centric, and I like that because they could ask questions. So sometimes if you open all of that up, then you have other people come in, and then you kind of lose the very local part of it. So what would be easiest, what would work for you, Michael, on that
The first thing I'll
first?
say is that was exactly what you said. I need advance notice,
Yeah.
stuff the day of, stuff even the tomorrow. That means I have to drop whatever I'm working on and
Mhm.
rush to put something out that may or may not be relevant, which means I don't have time to check on it. It means I don't have time to run it by the council to see if you
Mhm.
all approve of it.
Right.
So we definitely need a notice.
Mhm.
I can write up a little SOP on how and what I send out as far as a, notification. I don't want to just be like yelling fire, fire all the time. And also, I don't really think people read my emails, especially the more I send, they have a diminishing returns on them. And I definitely don't think people read our website. It might be a nice place to store stuff if I could create a new page, which again, the website is not super user friendly right now, on the admin side or the user side. I guess I would say we need to create a process for how we approve and builds in enough time to do all of that process. Just today, I've gotten emails from at least 3 different individuals not on the council demanding that I share stuff, including bird flight patterns and requests for people to turn off their outdoor lights, including a major issue on East-West Highway, a missed dog, a house for sale by owner they want to advertise on our communications, and about 15 emails about attainable housing. So if you're sending me something about attainable housing, I have probably already seen that from 4 other people. So I have a serious question of like, what do I share and what don't I share?
Right.
Just because someone sends it to me, just because that person is really knowledgeable and this is a really important issue, doesn't mean I can just like drop everything and send that instead of sending everything else. So it does cause us
Let's
a
take
legitimate problem for me.
yeah, let's take a step back and again, not tonight. I mean, let's take it as an administrative thing is what's a low hanging fruit? And again, we have other municipalities that have established a page and they've already posted. Some resources are not changing, right? Like there's all the plans that the county has issued. And then I think there's just this other issue of just all these sessions, right? And some are already well-known, and then there are these ones that come up that just, so anyway, let's take it offline. I think that there's a way that's low-hanging fruit that we could get something up quickly that.
And I
is
support that, and I support that, yeah.
But I would just say in general, I've been receiving a lot of emails and calls. I think there's a misconception that that one or all the council members don't know about attainable housing. We all know about attainable housing. We're all read in. But we're like you, residents. This is an issue that we are responding to in real time. So this is a boots on the ground, all boots on the ground issue. So residents, you are encouraged to contact Mr. Andrew Friedson and to attend these listening sessions. There's the one she mentioned earlier. It's on Wednesday at BCC High School. It's in the auditorium. You have to register online. I'll be there. We can carpool if you want. But we've been advertising that, and Michael's been doing a great job dropping things, getting the word out when he can. But the thing is, people come at me and they're like, are we doing anything about attainable housing? I'm like, do you know about it? I'm like, do I know about it? Yes, I do. So, maybe people aren't reading the emails, or maybe our new tech system can help with these kinds of situations. But, we are very much all in the know, and we're trying to share this information as well as we can. And as chair, especially dealing with this issue, I want to remain calm about it, collaborative and communicative. So that's my goal on this. And we're going to get a plan in place.
I have a quick county question. Does anyone know whether the county executive has veto authority over council?
He doesn't.
He does not.
He does not.
Okay.
And the understanding, this is again, not to but well, anyway, I won't even mention it. He does not.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
One thing to mention, so Katie, like what you just said now, honestly is awesome. And that's why I'm thinking, and I now, Michael, you have the right to your own opinion. I actually have used the website frequently. Like there's a lot of great information. So I don't want to bash it too much. I mean, there is a good resource for things. So I just share that, like just some little statement like that, that's like 4 sentences about what are we doing? Or what, you know, I think will go a long way. And then just under that, these are the resources you could go to. And then in weekly or just at the end is if you have any, you know, if you want to go, this is, and you just link them to the page. Because I totally am on the same page with you, but I think right now there isn't like a source or a place they can go, except if they go to another community's website. So if we had something that just shows, oh, this is the statement from the chair or from the council of just here's information, we're working on it, I think that could go a long way of appeasing some of this.
I could design something this weekend and I could send you we could workshop it and I'll send it around to everybody and we can do that. That's fine.
So awesome, I promise. The last rhetorical ones,
okay.
the software, I think that's amazing. Maybe at some point we could arrange a demo or something, because that would just be neat. I mean, I'm a software geek, so that's great. And then the final thing, just for transparency, I know there's that MML coming up in November. So take it offline. I don't know who might be interested. I'm certainly interested, though it's 3 days. I don't know if I could do 3 days, but if it's a day pass or even half day, but.
Where's the November one held?
It rotates every year. It's in Cambridge this year. The summer conference is the one that's kind of they're the big one, and that's in Ocean City every year. And I go to that one. But the fall conference is their legislative session, so it's really just talking about state legislation that's coming up. So I am interested in going. Like I said earlier, I'm a part of that certificate program, and there's classes at each one of their conferences that kind of work towards your certificate. So
and the reason why, because it will be dealing with some of the state issues, this issue will certainly come up. And so I think it'd be good to have a presence to.
Oh, yeah.
it's on my radar. I'm looking at it as well. So
You know that.
Cool.
All right, so I think, resident comments. John, are you finished, Michael? Thank you.
Very finished.
You have done great. Okay, Marty.
Thank you so much for this meeting. I could not be more thrilled. Michael, the stuff you're doing on the communications, and Katie, I know you've had a hand in that too, is so needed and so, I mean, the website, the new getting rid of constant comment, I mean, music to my ears. Jeff's point about having a sort of a page that people can go to for info on the zoning is critical. I'm getting a zillion questions too, and I'm not even on the council. So yes, this is Michael, you are so on the right track. And thank you for following up on the parking enforcement, because certainly we're not going to need less of that in the future. We're going to need more. And I wanted to, there's lots to say, but I am so pleased. Katie, I want to commend you, the whole council, and Michael. This was a superbly informative meeting. And the last point I want to make is actually financial. On Arthur, this is something you said to me some time ago, but Jeff, I know you're aware of it. If we get hit, as Martin's Additions, with infrastructure costs where we have to replace water mains or double our sewer capacity, there's no way that the current revenue will do that. And there's a risk here that no one's mentioned about the zoning thing that I want to put in you, the council's back pocket. Arthur, you told me some years ago that most of our revenue comes from the state income tax, and that for Martin's Additions, we're extremely fortunate because we have a small handful of people with very high incomes, which is why our finances have been so good, you know, because one of the things that happens when you have this kind of infill zoning with quads and density and congestion and parking problems is that rich people move away. That's happened to a lot of towns. I mean, Lisa said that didn't have a whole lot of reference on this. There's references on what happens when you do this kind of multi-zoning and single family all over the country. Utica, New York, where my husband's from. You can see, I mean, it just demolished the villages around and all the rich people moved away. So there is a potential revenue impact here from this zoning change that nobody's talked about and that may be unique to Martin's Additions because we are so dependent on that handful of people with extraordinarily high incomes. And if they move out of the village, not only would we possibly have, you know, way bigger staffing and infrastructure costs to handle, but our income could drop, it could plummet. Arthur and Jeff, I know I'm not going to mention any names here, but we are vulnerable in a way financially that maybe other villages aren't, in that we are really dependent on the income from that handful of high income people. So I am, when I think about the finances down the road here as an economist, I'm like really worried. And that's another issue on zoning. It doesn't need to be publicly discussed at the county level, but it sure is something that's in my mind as a resident here in looking at our future income to handle anything that comes down the road. Thank you. With that note, I'm just going to say terrific meeting. I really appreciate all of you very, very much. And Michael, your manager's report just made me want to sing and dance. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Marty. Susan Kahn. That's nice.
Hi. Sorry, I wasn't
Hi.
here in the middle part. Whoops, sorry. There we go. Hi. So I really appreciated Lisa Giovanni's presentation. I'm sorry I couldn't hear all of it. I heard most of it actually, but then I had to get off.
And she's also going to be she's going to supply it to us, so we'll send it out.
Oh, good.
You can see it.
She had mentioned that there are no changes proposed for building height, setbacks, or lot coverage. And my question was, no changes compared to what? To what the county does, or to what our village does, and what it says? Because I thought they were maybe a little bit different. I'm not sure that they're exactly the same. And then what that leads to is, she said, there will be conformance to a pattern book. And when I looked at those patterns, I thought, gee, even within our village, we have a sort of set of standards, and we've had conflicts or issues around how to interpret those among residents and council, even last year regarding stormwater drainage or walls or some other things. And so my question regarding the conformance to the pattern book is, and maybe this was addressed by the letter. I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that. But I hope that the council will gain some clarity from someone at the county level about what our role will be in this development. In other words, will we have a role if we think that a home or a building that's a duplex or a single or or triplex does not conform to that book's patterns the way we would think it would, what role does the Village of Martin's Additions Council or residents have in participating in the decisions or choices that are made by the developer, or in contesting the decisions or choices that are made? And at what stage in the process, like in terms of the schedule of getting the permits and the other things, will we be able to voice concerns or see plans, or allow neighbors to see plans? I understand that we're not, all they're concerned about is the relationship of the building to the pattern book, but we have our own residents to think about, and I don't want there to be conflict later on about, well, you as the council members should make sure that you're having some say or giving us a say. But the more that you can open it up to residents being able to put eyes on the stuff and look at it, because it's not really council members are too busy. This is a volunteer position, et cetera. Typically, the neighbors are the most concerned about what's going to go right next to them. So I just want to make sure that they're still going to have an opportunity to see, that we're going to have an opportunity at some point to see what's done and when. And finally,
Arthur has a response to some of your questions.
Yeah, sure.
We believe that right now, we will have the authority to enforce our own building codes. So you can't go out of our present building codes. The letter that we are sending to our legislators is to make a very small change in the state code that removes any ambiguity on that. The state attorney general who's looked at the code says, don't worry, you will have all of your present authorities. Some people think there's some ambiguity we are trying to remove. So whatever we control now, we will be able to control in the future.
That sounds,
yeah, the only thing I share, and again, I'm not the then to Arthur's rosy colored glasses. I mean, I have concerns because I think that we've heard from state level officials. We've also heard from planning board officials. When you talk about the pattern book and you talk about single family municipalities, there has been on public record statements about setbacks and requirements on footprints that are considered obstacles. And that's where that reasonable standard is. So I just want to put I mean, believe me, I want to put blinders on my ears, my eyes, and listen to Arthur and say, awesome.
Right.
But the reality is that
It could change.
when I was at MML, you literally had, from the governor's office, from his cabinet, folks who are literally in charge of this policy, which is their major platform, were openly talking about single-family municipalities and that their restrictions are major obstacles to attainable affordable housing. So I don't believe this is near settled matter, and we've got to stay on top of it. And that pattern book, the last thing on it, not to prolong this, is I mean, if it stayed intact where we had authority, then we wouldn't have the concerns about the pattern book, because our authority would override that like it does in current day. But if it turns out that it's determined for some reason we don't, then we'd be really concerned, because those pattern books do not in any way, shape, or form conform to the standards that we have today. So I hope that makes.
So it would require both state, well, at least state, and then perhaps county changes to their own laws. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you very much for that clarification. What I wanted to say is, if you can add a sentence, I don't know if it could be added, and I'm sorry I didn't hear all the letter, but the question that came to my mind right away when I heard there will be no changes proposed for the building height, setbacks, and lot coverage. What I want to ask, and I want them to clarify, is who changes to whose regulations or, ideas about the building height, setbacks, and lot coverage. In other words, I'm rather certain that I don't think that they're writing it for each municipality might have different ideas on that.
Right.
So when they say that later on, I can certainly imagine a judicial determination saying, well, this didn't vary from the existing county regulations on X, Y, Z. Obviously they're different because we had that house torn down on Oxford that we would have had a different, we had a need to look at what was happening. And anyway, that might be different, but I just want to make sure that it's our notice to ours, and that ours will trump theirs at some point. The last thought I had was that I'm very concerned about the areas north of Turner in terms of as a community, because it sounds like they're being put in a different category of zoning that said anything that's a mile from certain, maybe the Purple Line has a thing on Connecticut Avenue or something, a mile and 500 feet, I think they said, from that. And they showed a little map that pretty much put stuff north of Turner in a separate category that might allow different sort of planning. That really interferes with our community standards. We're a kind of municipality that has these standards for our entire neighborhood. And if we only have like 2 more blocks, but I certainly think that we have a legal argument or a kind of neighborhood municipality argument to make that when we have our standards around setbacks, building height, lot coverage, et cetera, that goes for our existing homes with our footprint. And our footprint includes the part north of Turner Lane for those 1 or 2 blocks. Because if we don't assert that and clarify that, it's going to be putting them in a different category, and it's really going to change, like the relationship of the council members to the residents there will be different. It could just cause a bit of tension. And I think that's important for us to acknowledge that. I don't want them kind of disrupting our
let me clarify. The north of Taylor Street would allow quadruplexes, and it says it doesn't do anything about the setbacks. So given that we are allowed to maintain our current setbacks and other restrictions, they would still apply over the whole village. The difference about the north of Taylor would be they could put in quadruplexes within the constraints.
Yeah, I guess what I would hope is that we could argue that as a community that we have a kind of aesthetic, I don't know, singularity.
I don't know from aesthetics.
A certain commonness of standards and enforcement, and it would create an inequitable situation where one neighbor can have a tripod. I don't know. It just, to me, I think we can make an argument about why we should be, as a contiguous community and municipality, go by the same rules that we as a municipality have. I think it's going to cause a lot of confusion within our sort of governance to have different codes or anyway, but that's just my thought on that. Sorry.
Thank you. Yasmina, did you have a comment?
Yeah, very, very quickly. So first
Yeah.
of all, just echo Marty's thanks to all of you for the work you've done and for this great meeting and for inviting Lisa. I thought that was very, very helpful. So thank
Thanks
you.
for staying with us
Thank
in the room where it happens. Yeah.
Very excited to hear about the new technology.
Mhm.
I mean, moving into the 21st century, I still hope for an electronic directory at some point rather than spending village dollars on the print format. If there is an app, is there any way of incorporating that into the app?
There are issues that have been raised of privacy issues. And then that gets, and also a digital one can get distributed around the world.
It wouldn't be, if we did it, it wouldn't be on the app I'm talking about. The app I'm talking about is for our communications at Word. If you're going to create some sort of login chat room type features, or even just a list, it needs to be behind a login. So that would actually be a website option. That's a different conversation.
Well,
but,
I was
yeah.
thinking of something similar to the apps that many schools have implemented
Oh,
to
yeah.
keep the privacy of
Mhm.
children's numbers
I've looked at a couple of
confidential. I think
demos.
if we can handle it for the schools, we can certainly handle it for the village.
Yeah.
And it would be great to also have a calendar on an app, because as we have so many things happening and happening very quickly, being able to consult the information quickly would be very helpful. Or to have an iCal, be able to download the iCal would also be helpful. Just thinking aloud. On
Excellent.
the
Yeah,
point
thank
of
you.
Oxford Street, I know that in the past we've had issues with just notification to residents of applications for permits. And I'm sure all the T's are being crossed and the I's are being dotted on this. But just a reminder that there is a 1 month consideration for permits at the county level. And so any event organized by the village for information for the residents should really happen within that month, so that people then have the opportunity to, appeal to the county if there are any issues.
Mhm.
So that rapid notification that we have in our code really needs to happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I know it's a lot, but so appreciative of all of you and Michael, all of the work that you do for this village.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I think I don't see any other, okay. Marty, is that a new hand? We have one more comment? Oh, Marty, I think you're on mute.
Trying to unmute. There we go. Thank you
Oh,
again for a really informative meeting. Michael, thank you again for improving the communications. And I second what Yasmina just said about having information where residents can go to one place. I mean, all of that is good. I would like to ask Michael, as you're developing the new website and communications, to actually give residents a chance to see the markup so that we can give you some community input on things that would be helpful to us in terms of the new communication functionality. So just, think about community input on that process, and I know you will. And I also want to thank Susan Kahn for her point, because I looked at that map that we saw tonight, and I gotta tell you, those of us on the north end sort of feel like we're in the bullseye, and I would not want to see double standards here. I think that would be really unhelpful for our community cohesiveness, which we've been working hard to rebuild. And again, well, Susan Kahn is right about that. We need to have a single standard for our village. And those on the north end would really appreciate it. I think I can vouch for most of my neighbors saying that we don't want to have larger stuff on the north end than the south if we can possibly not have that. Make sense? Thank you. And again, thanks for a great meeting.
Thank you, Marty. Okay, and then Jeff, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm actually going to use you as my inspiration for the last agenda item, which is, I've introduced this at our last meeting. It's a new agenda item. It's called council comments. And so basically, I introduced this addition on the agenda because the inspiration is what you just now, and based on my experience as a council member and not always the loudest voice in the room, sometimes I had a lack of opportunity, like to speak to new issues or provide updates on issues that like we're each individually interested in, but lack like a set point on the agenda. So this is a space for my 4 colleagues. I've said, what did we say? Maybe up to 2 minutes, if that. Just so I'm going to yield time to you if you want to say anything, add anything before we adjourn. Susan, no? Okay, Arthur?
Save it for the next meeting.
Okay, Jeff, you were about to say something, so
Sure,
I thought.
I'll make it, and hopefully under the 2 minutes. First, one thing I just want to mention, Michael, you know, when you're doing the design of the website and all that, and that could be content is just, could be overwhelming, right? We're talking one issue, but there's a lot of things. And so one thing to consider, I know we put it in the budget, is whether or not there's the possibility intern or whoever, you know, so you get a little bit of muscle because content is always changing. And just, it could be like, I wouldn't say full-time, but it could be a massive amount of energy. And maybe there are ways of having some young folks from the village or even from your relationship with University of Maryland. I want to thank, you know, Katie and the council and the opportunity to have someone come today from the county to talk about their plans. But what Susan Kahn just brings up, I know this is not the day or the session for us to go in to this. And I know that each council member has their own potential view, whether, you know, as a council member or even personal. But I think one thing that I am, you know, that I see out of this is that this is going to get ugly and messy before it gets better. I mean, we're seeing right now, I think there's a pretty significant, folks know about this, right? I think there was a bit of a dormancy, but you're starting folks to start get engaged, whether it's within VMA or outside of it. So I don't know how quickly this is going to be settled, right? You know, we may even see things that get litigious from individual residents. I don't know what our strategy is, and that is going to be something that we will discuss. But I just kind of, what Susan is sharing, what Susan Kahn had shared, that really does, you know, I'm concerned as a council member and I'm concerned as a treasurer, but just the idea that there are going to be demarcation lines that cut across our municipality, that's really concerning. And, you know, how does that play out? So I do think just putting that on the table, this is going to be, I think, a difficult year in that respect, because we're going to have probably some of the greatest challenges that this community has ever had.
You know, there's one political issue that comes up here. I'm not sure how it plays out, but only 18% of the county live in municipalities. So that means that municipalities as a whole have a relatively small voice in the county political volume. So this is something to think about. I'm saying, I note that as a fact. I'm not sure how it plays out. I don't know what the impact is.
And I think on, you know, just as I'm closing here is, you know, we'll be in it together and we'll see how this evolves. And it's really, it seems like the beginning in some ways, because I think there's going to be a lot that's going to play out from listening sessions and seeing. So, you know, we'll learn it together and we'll see where we go.
Okay. Andrew, did you want to add anything, or not to put him on the spot? But
I might save my 40-page treatise that I was going to recite right now.
That's good.
until,
Thank
next month, so I'll pass.
Fellow council members are grateful.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to you all for attending tonight, especially Jeff and Andrew. Thank you for you know, jumping on. You have an excuse tardy. It's fine. Thank you for going to back to school night. That's important. All right. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Okay. Is there a second? All in favor? Andrew, he wants to get off.
Okay.